Good evening, and welcome to the October 17th, 2023 Board of Adjustment meeting. We are anticipating that this might be a long meeting, so we would like your consideration to keep your comments, and we will keep our comments as brief as possible. We are down Ms. Geffert, and so Ms. Record will be voting on all of the items. And the first item of business is approval of the September 19th, 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second? Mr. Ram?
I have comments.
Yes, please.
Okay.
We have the second. Go ahead.
Yeah, on page 3 at the top of the page, the paragraph against Mr. Rayam said the board had prior deliberation on the petition, but it was a complicated case and there was some lack of clarify, so the postponed was made. It just should be read some lack of clarity, so the postponement was made. So it's kind of grammatical, but it looks like autocorrect errors of some sort. And then further down on page 10, the last line of that says would not district drivers. The correct word there is distract drivers. So be looking to have those two changes made.
Okay.
I had one on page 5, the second to last line under discussion of the board. It says the only thing left was whether the lot size was an unnecessary change, and it should say unnecessary hardship.
Anybody else? You will accept those amendments?
Sure.
Okay. Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. September 19th minutes are passed. Approval of the September 26th, 2023 minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments on these?
Trying to remember, is this the one with the Kent Street?
Well, that was the
Previous one.
That's the previous one.
Oh, okay, never mind then.
Okay. Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. Those are also approved. Before we start tonight, I would like to do things. One is to remind you of the exact time. The presenters have 15 minutes, and if you want more, please ask us for an extra 5 minutes ahead of time. And the speakers have 5, unless we really get into trouble and we'll reconsider. Okay. And I would like to consider taking item 3C, Sagamore Avenue, out of order. We are down one person. We will have one recusal, and Mr. Rayam will need to leave early tonight. So I don't want to have board on a
Technically on time, but yes, that will
on
probably be
time,
early.
even though we always go late. And I don't want to have a 5-member board. So if we could have,
So you're looking for a motion to take this out of order?
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we will be hearing,
Who was the second on that? Sorry.
it was Jody.
Jody. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it was Ms. Record. So our first item of business is I have to find where I am.
5:50.
Yes, the request of Francis E. Mefflu's Revocable Trust of 2015 owner for property located at 550 Sagamore Road, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing structure and construct 2 duplexes, creating a total of 4 living units, which requires the following. 1. Variance from section 10.513 to allow more than one freestanding dwelling unit on a lot, and 2. Variance from section 10.440, use number 1.30, to allow the construction of duplexes where they are not permitted. Said property is located on Assessor Map 222, Lot 11, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts, here tonight on behalf of the Mafluzzi family. With me are Ted Alex and Patricia Cameron, who are the son and daughter and are the 2 of the trustees of the trust. Also with me tonight is Eric Weinrib from Altus Engineering, who has prepared the plans that we'll be looking at momentarily, Exhibit A. Steph, and also with me is Brian White, who's prepared the analysis property value impact report. He's here. I don't expect him to present anything to you in the interest of time unless you have questions for him, and the same with Eric. So what we have here at 550 Sagamore Avenue is a 62,754 square foot lot. On the lot is a 1960s circa single-family home. That home is, the front porch of that home, or front steps, is slightly within the front setback. The plan, thank you, Steph. The plan is to remove that home. You can see it there. We've also got photographs of it in the packet. By the way, for the board members, according to what we found, our Exhibit A starts on page 67 of your packet. And then other things, site photographs, et cetera, get moved to 150. So my associate told me, just to help, I'll try to refer to them as I go through so it's easier for you to find. So what we are intending to do is remove that single-family house in favor of 2 duplex units, next page, that are set back, the closest one about 48 feet from the property line. The existing home, in addition to being aged, has a very wide driveway to it, so we will be removing that home and are asking for relief to have more than one dwelling unit on the lot, and these 2 duplex units, a total of 4, which need the variances that the chair read. As far as density, this area, this SRB area, provides a minimum of 15,000 square feet per lot. Doing just that math for density, we're on about 15,700 per unit. So we do meet the density, we just don't meet the single-family dwelling. Across the street are the Sagamore Court apartments. Those are very dense at about 9.6 units per acre. Right up from that is the Tidewatch condominium, which is 117 units. It's on a large lot, so its density is roughly ours, about 2 units per acre, and we're just under 3. There are a number of single-family homes in the area. Right next to us are single-family homes that are on lots that meet the requirements. Also close to us, I think on one side of us, is a home on a lot that doesn't meet the density. If you go 0.2 of a mile up or down the street, up or down Sagamore, and get on those side streets, there are numerous homes that don't meet the 15,000 square feet. In addition, Steph, if you can easily go to Exhibits F and G, which are page 158 and 159, I want to make a couple of points. Keep going.
What are they, Tim?
F is the tax map, and G is the GIS map. There we go. So there's the tax map, and this is what I was saying. If you can see our lot, it's a little hard to see. Sort of middle right of Sagamore is our long, narrow lot. And right next to us is a very small lot, doesn't meet density. Across the street, doesn't meet density. Down towards Jones Ave, all those homes don't meet density. And just off the tax map, those lots don't meet density. So we're in kind of what I call an eclectic area. Can you go to the next exhibit? Right there. It's a little small, but you can see we are in an area where approximately 4 or 5 zoning districts meet. We're in SRB, that's the green lot. Across the kind of tan lot, that's SRA. The orangey lot is the GA district. So you've got the beginnings of a number of districts that meet right about where this lot is. And that's part of the eclectic nature, as I'm mentioning, is that you've got very dense places across the street. You've got houses on dense lots. You've got a few houses that are not on dense lots. So we think that it makes perfect sense to provide this opportunity for development. There is an economic factor in it, but it will also allow for the sale of homes. Everything is expensive in Portsmouth, but condominium units will be a little less than single families. Steph, if you can go to the last exhibit, H, at 161, there it is. So, Eric, we played around with considering a straight-up subdivision, and that's what this H is. It's a conceptual subdivision lot that Eric Weinrod put together, And as you can see, we would need a city-wide right-of-way with a cul-de-sac for turnaround. We can get 3 lots in there, but it would be a sea of pavement, and it would require the houses on those back lots to be within the wooded area. Right now, because our units are towards the front half of the lot, that whole back is going to remain wooded. The board went through it, but a few months ago, I was here for another client, and the board approved 4 standalone units across the street on the Lester King property. Again, different zone, a little bit different density requirements, but it was multiple houses on a lot, and the board thought that made sense, as did we, and as do we here. So in summary, we meet density. We've got Sagamore, Tidewatch, the Lester Clean site across the street that are fairly significant. We've got a number of homes nearby on small lots, a number on lots that meet the requirements. A 3-lot subdivision just doesn't make sense in terms of what it's going to do to the neighborhood or this lot, and we're in a transition area. With that, unless you have questions, I'll go into the variance requirements. The first is, we always do the first 2 together under the Malachi Glen case that I always cite. The variances are not contrary to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. I always start in my submission with consideration of the purposes of the zoning ordinance. There are 7 of them. I'm not going to detail those unless you have questions about them. I've outlined it fairly in detail in my submission on pages 3 and 4. But the summary of the Supreme Court under those 2 tests is, will granting the variance and the subsequent project alter the essential character of the locality, or will it threaten the public health, safety, or welfare? Well, as I mentioned, the locality is eclectic. You've got several different zoning districts meeting right there. You've got several different forms of ownership, single-family, condominium, apartments, all in that area. Within 0.2 of a mile north or south, you've got a number of small houses that don't meet density. So we believe we meet the character of the locality, given its eclectic nature nearby. Next, we don't think it will threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. We're pretty confident about that because we will be saving pavement, as indicated on this exhibit, saving wooded area to the rear by having these units more or less towards the front half of the lot. The new homes will be fully 2 code. The existing home is a circa 1960. It's an okay home, and it probably doesn't meet today's code in all respects. And certainly we think that the public health, safety, and welfare is protected better by this 2-building, 4-unit project than would 3 units that we believe would be permitted by right with all that pavement and cutting. The third of the 5 tests is that granting the variances will not diminish surrounding property values. Again, Brian White has considered that. He's given you a very detailed report. I'll just summarize what he analyzed the existing development, the proposed development, the neighborhood and abutters, the factors that impact values such as views, use, and standards, and came to the conclusion that this proposal and the variances needed do not diminish surrounding property values. I will leave it at that. The fourth of the 5 tests is the hardship test. 3 prongs to that. Special conditions distinguish the property from others in the area. The lot is relatively large compared to many in the area that are single-family house lots now. Obviously, the condominium, the Tidewatch lot, and the Sagamore Court lots are quite large, but there are numerous small lots. There are numerous largest lots that, as I've said, some meet density, some don't meet density. So when we have a lot in this area that meets the 15,000 square feet per dwelling unit requirement, we think it doesn't make sense to put one, which could be a very large home, on the lot when this is a better project. 3 large homes on the lot where this is a better project for the reasons I've stated. We think those factors combine to create special conditions. The second prong is that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance and its application here. Why do we have limitations on density, on 1 dwelling per lot, et cetera? We want to avoid overcrowding. We want to allow for air, light, sight distances, separation between neighbors, and permit stormwater treatment. We will be improving, we believe, the site distances by having the one driveway instead of the wide one that, the way it's situated, sometimes requires you to back out into the busy Sagamore Road. We meet the density requirement of 15,000 square feet. We meet all other dimensional requirements, setback, coverages, height, all of those things are met. And we will be going to the planning board for approval. There is going to be fencing and/or heavy vegetation for the sides and where available in the front of the lot. So we just believe there's no fair and substantial relationship between what the one dwelling unit per lot is trying to accomplish and its application in this instance. As I put it in my submission, restriction of one dwelling building per lot and prohibiting duplexes has no fair and substantial relationship as applied in this instance. In sum, the proposal is reasonably consistent with the surrounding area, which includes dense condominium and apartment complex, numerous homes on relatively small lots in close proximity. Finally, the proposed use is reasonable. It's a permitted use. Residential is permitted. We need the variances, but the use itself, residential use, is permitted in the zone, so is deemed reasonable. And finally, substantial justice test. The cases I cite, if there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, this factor is satisfied. Any loss to the applicant not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. So we're removing a somewhat aged and slightly setback non-compliant single-family home with a wide curb cut at Sagamore Avenue in favor of a narrower curb cut, 2 code-compliant duplex buildings farther from Sagamore Avenue. We're adding the proposal adds significant north and south landscaping and fences, preserves the rear wooded area for the benefit of those neighbors while providing relatively more affordable housing than single-family homes would. So we believe that substantial justice is done by granting the variances, and we believe there's no harm to the public if they're granted, while there will be great harm to the Mafluzzi family if they are denied. I tried to go quickly to move this along.
You did a good job.
I usually do. I have trouble not going long, but I don't know if you have any questions for me or if anybody wants to add anything from my team. No, unless you have questions.
Do we have questions? Yes.
So my question to you is, where is the hardship in not being able to build another single-family dwelling on this lot?
Well, the hardship test is set forth in the 3 prongs that I mentioned. One is that there's special conditions that distinguish the property. I think I've gone through those. It's a largish property for this area. It's 4 times the size of the minimum required lot size for a single-family home. There are some others that are that large, but most of the ones in the general vicinity are not that large. I used as an example the board's granting multiple dwelling units on a lot across the street at the Lester King site, which we think was proper. Different zone. Standalone units, so there are some differences, but it was multiple families. There are a number of houses on very small lots, so comparatively, given this lot's location, compared to other lots and densities in the area, and considering the area where these zoning districts all meet, this lot has special conditions. That's our proposal.
Mr. Mantle?
You mentioned earlier that the current house is non-conforming.
Slightly.
How?
The front steps go over the front property line slightly.
Because according to the staff report, everything about the existing condition of this house is conforming.
Well, if you go to the, this plan, let me just.
Microphone.
You can see it up there. It's very slightly nonconforming, which I say, and it's slightly nonconforming. If you look at that image, Exhibit A, page 67 of your packet, that front porch and those steps are just slightly over the front setback line. So I don't know if
Okay,
the
'cause
staff
the
didn't catch that. It's pretty minor, but it exists.
Okay.
Any other questions?
If I could just add, we usually go by the survey report. I'm not sure where I, off the top of my head, pulled this number from in the staff report, but we do go by the survey information. So if that's, survey information
Okay.
is what I would deem as correct, and I would say I'm erred in that.
And I read the staff report and didn't pick up on it. If I had picked up on it, I would have mentioned something about it. Any other questions?
Other questions? Yes, Mr. Ram.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So on page 152 of our packet, there's a series of photos of the existing home. It's apparent from those and from going by, it seems like this current home is somewhat elevated relative to the street level. I couldn't really tell from your new plan, is your intent to have your new structures also be elevated relative to the street level, or is there going to be, you know, some significant excavation to try and then make them essentially at the street level?
I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Weinrib to answer. I think I know, but I don't want to answer and not be certain. Eric?
Good evening. For the record, Eric Weinrib with Altus. The grade goes up fairly substantially behind the house, so it's drive under garage and the house is elevated. As the houses are set, the nearest house is set 48 feet plus back from the street. We'll be up a little higher. We'll be more matching the grade of the area behind the house. So we'll be up a little bit higher than the street, with everything draining back towards the front to allow it to have the stormwater management areas in the front partially and in the back. So we're not going to, not our intent to overly excavate the site, to work with the natural contour.
Okay, so the expectation is these duplexes would be fairly prominently high up relative to the streetscape?
Yes, but they're going to be, the closest is 48 feet plus back from the street line, and we're going to have a very robust planting to mask it from the street.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this proposal? In favor? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? You may just come up.
Hello, I've never done this before, so I don't know if there's protocol, but...
Tell us your name and address.
Right. So my name is Susan Harding, and I live at 594 Sagamore Avenue. So I am an abutter. When I bought my home in 1997, the value of my home was in the land and nature surrounding my house. To live on such a busy main road, yet have such peace and beauty and privacy, is tremendously valued. I trusted when I bought my house that the zoning would not change. Our properties have a buffer of land between Sagamore and Walker Bungalow, where there is active wildlife that needs to be protected. I can't imagine any one of you would want to change what we have, the privacy, the land, the nature behind our homes. We don't want that taken away. It's been that way for, I don't know, maybe like decades and decades. Since I bought my house, there really hasn't been much change in the neighborhood. And the gentleman talking about the zoning across the street is completely different. It's apples and oranges. And we were very opposed to the Lester King situation, but that's another story. So I vehemently oppose the request to change the zoning and want it to stay as it is, single dwelling only. With reference to the 5 criteria, the request to change the current law is contrary to the public and neighbors' interest. So to allow 4 dwellings in a unit where only 1 dwelling is allowed is called spot rezoning. And spot rezoning is basically letting a land use board, like the zoning board, rezone part of a district on their own authority. And my understanding is this is not allowed. The spirit of the ordinance is not being observed. By adding 4 families, 8 cars, traffic, delivery trucks, everything going in and out of there, and then coming out onto an already very, very busy street. It's really kind of dangerous as it is, and it was one of the reasons we were opposing the Lester King. We don't need more congestion. Substantial justice, I feel, is not being done. I feel the value of my property, which is 2 houses away, will be impacted because this is, I'm frightened that it's going to set a precedent. You know, my neighbors have a lot of property, and to try to compare all the different amounts of property, these houses have been there for decades and decades. On our little neighborhood part of the street, there hasn't been any new building. So things have been very stable, and we expected that's how it's going to stay. That's how it was zoned, single dwelling only, which is different than across the street. So the current ordinance, as I said, allows only one dwelling per lot. There is no hardship in allowing a multifamily project like this to take place in the middle of an established single-family neighborhood. It outweighs the benefit to the applicant by harming the general public and abutting homeowners. Substantial justice would not be done if this application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Rick Hayes. I live on 40 Walker Bungalow. If you want to pull up the proposal again with the two houses or duplexes, I can show you where I live.
We need the microphone.
Tax map.
If you're going to speak, excuse me, if you're going to speak, you are going to need the mic, and do not touch the screen.
Do not.
Okay?
I would never touch the screen for the record.
Just a gentle warning.
but- Yeah, I understand. I use them.
Have to go to page 58. It's the tax map.
So my property, there's a beige house in the bottom right corner of that drawing. My property line starts right behind there and runs the entire length of that property. I'm a 25-year resident. I'm a small business owner. I'm a butter to the property located at 550 Sagamore Road. We moved our family into Walker Bungalow in 2019 from South Street to escape the density of the city and gain space for the family. We picked Walker Bungalow for its zoning, for its natural wooded environment, for the wildlife, and the low-light environment that is special to that area. We have had about a week to digest this 100-plus page proposal. It's obviously very well, or very comprehensive. Although it appears better than the plan in Exhibit H to basically clear-cut the entire property that includes the forest and habitat for wildlife, and put a cul-de-sac with 3 homes in this area, I still see issues for the current proposal for the following reason. I don't see any hardship here. This is a development for profit with cookie-cutter duplexes that can be sold for $1 million plus per unit, or $4 million in total. The references to property across the street and up into Dover, I don't believe have any relevance for our area. This was zoned as an SRB for a reason, and the proposal violates the zoning. I don't believe we are an eclectic neighborhood. Our neighborhood is tight. We all love the area for the reasons Susan spoke to. In summary, I do see this as a better solution than Exhibit H, but I feel like we're being forced to choose between two things that we shouldn't have to even consider. Both proposals bring homes right up against each other. It's too dense. It's there to maximize profits. We're already a city becoming one that the average person can't afford. And plans like this just further accelerates the exit of longtime residents. I think we have to ask ourselves, are we representing the current residents and the zoning as originally intended, or developers and people looking to maximize profit? And that's it.
Thank you.
Sorry for coming close to the
No,
screen.
it's fine. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Hi, my name is Linda Brown. I've lived at 650 Sagamore Ave since my husband and I built the house 36 years ago. I'm requesting that the board adhere to the ordinance as written for a single dwelling property at the 550 Sagamore Avenue. Adding more dwellings than what is presently zoned for will be detrimental to our neighborhood. It will add additional traffic to an already very busy road. where vehicles travel well over the speed limit. It will also pose additional safety concerns with more cars pulling in and out of the driveways. It also will add to the difficulty that we, as neighbors, are experiencing now, leaving and entering our driveways. Our side of the street is mostly single-family homes. The Sagamore Court has been there for 50-plus years, and it's a different environment over there than it is on ours. Ours is very peaceful. You don't hear a lot of the traffic, especially when we're in our backyards. Most of my neighbors have lived in their homes for several years. When we decided to purchase them, we did so because we didn't want to live in a space any closer to the surrounding dwellings than we presently are. Although we do live on a very busy road, we all have lovely private backyard spaces that we take great pride in. To change the zoning just to increase financial gain upon selling a property for developmental purposes does not pose a hardship, and the zoning should remain a single residence dwelling as it was intended to be. I strongly feel that changing the zoning for this property is wrong and ask you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening, members of the Board of Adjustment. This is double-spaced. It won't take all that much time.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Richard Wilder. We are abutters, my wife and I, to the end of the subject property. We live at 58 Walker Bungalow Road, and we have lived there for 54 years. So I want to take this opportunity to speak against the proposed Mafloozy property. The variances make a request to replace the single-family residence per property ordinance that is now in place. Per the proposal, two-family duplexes with a large footprint would be placed on a property after the existing home was leveled. Our property is one of the 5 that directly abut the property in question. We abut at the end of the corridor. If you want to bring up the picture of the duplexes, you'll see that we're at the very end of the green area. So if you go down to the end, you see that orange edifice right there, that's where our property begins. Our property is about a half an acre, and it's about the same width as the corridor, and it's one of the smaller parcels of abutting land. So I want to speak directly to some of the suppositions stated in the proposal. First, of a general nature, the request for granting these 2 variances goes completely against the character and nature of this community of single residences. Most certainly, placing 2 large 4-family duplexes on the property alters the essential character of the locality and violates the spirit of the existing ordinance. Next, there is considerable energy in the proposal devoted to attempting to relate the zoning of areas across the street as justification for these 2 variances. I see a little relevance between what has taken place across the street and the corridor of single residence home on our side of Sagamore. There is similar energy spent comparing installations in other towns as evidence of the suitability of the proposal. Once again, what takes place miles away from our city does not convince me that the variance is in the public interest. One of the requirements to accept the variances is that the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. I maintain that the public good of the surrounding area will be adversely affected with the development of 2 large footprint, non-complying, 80-foot-long duplexes next to single residence homes. I note that it is mentioned that this development will preserve the rear wooded area that is forested presently, that exists between my house and the proposed duplexes. In the event that the variances are approved, it would be in the abutter's best interest to have that a stipulation be put into the decision that the rear wooded area would indeed be preserved. In closing, I would like to state that I believe that the ordinance for single residence homes was a covenant covenant established by wise people to protect the homeowners and their land. Please respect that into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Alden Sweet. I live at 72 Walker Bungalow, which abuts the property we're talking about in the back corner. I've lived there since 1995 with my wife. It's a very wooded area. I see all kinds of wildlife in the backyard, 10 deer at a time. I see 5 deer all the time. Anyway, if the SRB district zone does not allow any duplexes at all, I think this request should be rejected just on that criteria alone. Denial of the variance results in an unnecessary hardship. On page 21 of the application, it says, based on the MLS data, the anticipated market values of the subject's proposed duplex units will be in the range of $1 million or more. $4 million doesn't sound like a hardship to me. Portsmouth has a shortage of workforce housing presently. If these price tags are $1 million for each unit, that's not affordable housing. That's not something the middle class can afford. Granting the request will significantly improve the property and the surrounding area. As an abutter, my property is surrounding area. The construction of these 2 buildings isn't going to improve my property at all. Numerous references, as other people have said, have been made about the Sagamore Apartments. That's totally invalid. Sagamore Apartments are a different zone. They're not single family. The request cites variances that have been granted in surrounding towns. As other people have said, what goes on in Dover and Durham doesn't have any bearing on Portsmouth. It would be my recommendation to reject this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name's Eric McKnight. I'm the homeowner of 546 Sagamore. I'm actually the building bottom and to the right. So I am probably have a unique perspective as the newest member of my community. We purchased our home, our family, just 9 months ago. And this started back in 2022 when we learned that we'd be moving here for professional reasons. We started looking for a house and did not find the right house that we felt was appropriate for our family until December, where we moved in. I can't state how important it was for us to find the right home for us to live in that was both close to the school systems and the downtown area, but also gave single-family dwellings that we originally raised our family in for many years. It was important for us to find the right place. If this proposal is approved, our house right there, which we thought was going to be a private land, would actually look directly into the side of our house, where we have our kitchen, our living room, our dining room, our TV room, my bedroom, and our daughter's bedroom. It looks right into the side of our house, along with traffic that would have perhaps an additional 8 cars driving back and forth most parts of the day. What we thought we were moving into was this single-family dwellings with space between each home that seemed to be consistent throughout that zoned area. So it's offering this proposal, granting this proposal would vastly change our home and the investment that we just purchased. Lastly, it's cited in the proposal, they refer to this site in Dover, and it said that There's been no change to the value of the house that is abutting. I can honestly say, I don't know that I would have purchased this house if we had 4 dwellings looking into the side of our house. So had I known just 9 months ago, I think it would be a very different story for us and what we chose in terms of housing here in Portsmouth. So I ask that you vote against the variance to protect our investment and our choice to make a home here in Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. I thought it would be a good time to speak after the newest member of the neighborhood came before the board. I am the oldest member. My name is Joan Christie. I am the next door abutter to 550 Sagamore Avenue. I am a native of Portsmouth, and I have lived in this house that I inhabit at 576 since the 1980s and in my childhood as well. We're not talking about the land on the other side of the street. That is a whole different it's just totally different. This is this side of the street, the other side of the street. They are not zoned, obviously, the same way, nor have they ever been. So I thank Richard and Alden for pointing that out to me. Of course, the development of the land will affect me. Instead of looking out of my bedroom window at the land that I have stayed relatively the same for, well, about 150 years when this building was built. I will now be looking at a huge, and I notice now, even higher building, perhaps 2, than before. In fact, I will be looking at a wall. This proposal represents a major change to the area, and it paves the way for the development and condoization of the neighborhood. The spirit and intent of the 2 ordinances will have totally disappeared. As members of the planning board, your decision-making has far-reaching and important implications. I ask you to reject this proposal. Do not let it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Jim Lee, and I live at 520 Sagamore Ave. I've been a residential real estate broker for the past 43 years, and I incorporate some of that experience and expertise in my remarks. So one thing I would ask you is, when is it too much? When is development too much? I think we're past that point. We're at least at it. So privacy is a quickly disappearing commodity in Portsmouth. And to cram 4 housing units on one lot in a district of single-family homes will alter the essential character of our neighborhood and injure public rights. There is no hardship for 550 Sagamore Avenue because that property has no special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area. It's a single-family lot, just like all the rest of the single-family lots in the SRB district. The property is perfectly capable of being used in its present state. There's no hardship in allowing a multifamily project like this to take place in the middle of an established single-family neighborhood outweighs the benefit to the applicant by harming the general public and abutting homeowners. Substantial justice would not be done if this application is approved. You should also consider the unequivocal testimony of a direct abutter who recently purchased their home. He said, had this proposed project with its 4 living units been completed, they never would have made that purchase. This evidence is not just convincing, it's irrefutable proof that granting this variance will undeniably erode the values of surrounding property. Diminishing the desirability of living in a single-family zone neighborhood can only be directly responsible for diminishing our property values. In the realm of residential real estate, many factors influence a buyer's decision-making process. Privacy and the ambiance of a neighborhood are paramount in this equation. If this variance is granted, it will undermine one of the most important factors in a buying decision. Reducing the pool of willing buyers drastically decreases a property's worth and marketability. And I thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak in opposition?
Good evening. We've met before. My name is Tim McNamara. I live at 579 Sagamore Ave, unit number 19. Going through this process not too long ago at 635, all 5 criteria we know need to be met when looking for approval. And for 3 of them in particular, public interest, as it's been stated thus far, the ordinance and the spirit of the ordinance itself, and whether or not there is hardship are the 3 that are clearly non-starters here. In the documentation, the continued reference to Walker, again, and special conditions is not relevant here as far as I can determine, and other legal minds have already determined that in the other project across the way. The reference to the other zones as well as the recent approval for 635 isn't relevant necessarily either, and some would argue whether or not it was properly approved. And it still needs TAC, and it still needs planning. So even making any reference to 635 is not really relevant here. On page 3 of the packet, it looks like it states that it's looking for a permit for 4 dwellings where 1 is allowed. 4 for 1. Additionally, permit for 2 duplexes where duplexes are prohibited in the wording of the ordinance. Please uphold the spirit of this ordinance as it relates to these single-family homes that is, again, a very specific zone, regardless of the intersection of the multiple zones that Attorney Phoenix continues to reference. The public is speaking in an effort to uphold public interest. Public interest will be harmed if this is approved. Please deny this project.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Full disclosure, I am not an abutter, but I am opposed to this project. We speak about several things tonight, and is there hardship?
I'm sorry, name and
Oh,
address.
Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. I'm so sorry. I'm so used to doing it. I apologize.
It's okay.
Is there hardship? Is there hardship with the land? And I say no, as of many tonight. Is there a question with the zoning? Of course, otherwise they wouldn't be here. you know? I won't take your time this evening, other than to say you have an entire neighborhood behind me, and it's a small neighborhood, and they're all speaking out about the same thing. And so I get up tonight, not because I have standing, not because I'm in a butter, but because I am speaking for a neighborhood that I care about with friends who live in the neighborhood. That's neither here nor there, I realize, to you. But the fact of the matter is there is no hardship. And the only hardship there is that they're trying to fit $4 million condos onto one piece of property when it says that it's single-family dwelling only. Maybe that's put in simple terms, but it seems to me the only hardship here tonight is the amount of money that they stand to make or not make. The hardship is for the neighborhood. The hardship is that when they're all said and done and they make their buildings and they sell them all, the buildings and the abodes that they're making and selling are not affordable housing. $1 million and above. I didn't do the numbers, but I bet some of you have up there, and that's not represented properly as affordable housing, unless we're talking about the new 1% in Portsmouth. So I ask you, please, to save the homes and the lifestyle and the neighborhood as the people have always lived in that neighborhood. And I will say thank you very much for listening to me, and I will still say there is no hardship with the land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Peter Huda, 280 South Street. No, I am not a butter. I'm here to ask this board, what is the current zoning? The answer is single-family residential. No duplexes allowed. I also ask you, does this meet or not meet any of the criteria? Will this change the character of the neighborhood? Yes. These are single-family homes, as it was zoned. Does this decrease property value? It very well may. These are duplexes. Everybody else has a nice lot with a single-family home. Is there a hardship here? There's no hardship here. The only hardship here is profit or loss of profit. The other thing I would like to add here, as it was said numerous times, is the zoning across the street and down the street and what has been approved previously is totally irrelevant. We are talking about a single-family neighborhood that wants to go against the zoning that is already there. Please reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition?
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I am not a direct abutter, but I too believe, given the number of times that we've come before you for different neighborhoods, that we're all abutters. This is a community, and people are trying to save their homes and their neighborhood. And it'll be up to you folks to decide whether you're going to agree with a zoning that was set forth by your predecessors. And that zoning is single family. It's up to you folks to decide whether the 5 criteria are met. And we all know if one is not met, then the project should be denied. I ask you tonight to really think about and reflect about what has happened to some of our neighborhoods and the times we've come before you even a month ago over another street. And really think about what is right for the future of Portsmouth. Tonight, I ask you to deny this petition. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have someone, I'm moving to 2 for or against, and we do have someone online.
All right.
Hello.
Oh, go ahead.
My name is Christina Willie McKnight. I'm sorry, I don't know how to make the camera go on right now. My husband Eric spoke earlier. We live at 546 Sagamore. I think everyone has spoken very eloquently to what this is going to do for our family, specifically for our neighborhood. We did just buy this house less than a year ago. And I think the thing I really want to say in this moment to all of you who are making this decision is two things. One is that I'm a researcher. I like to read the research and the information. And your website is wonderful. When we were trying to figure out where to live, I spent a lot of time on your website, learning about Portsmouth, learning about the different characters of the different neighborhoods. I read books about it. I wanted to find out as much as I could about where we might be and how we would experience that for ourselves and our son who's in high school and our daughter who's in middle school. And we chose where we did because we wanted to be in having that wonderful balance that we have on Sagamore Avenue. The report talks a lot about the apartments. I walk in the apartments regularly, and I also walk on our side of the street, and it's completely different. I would ask any of you who might think that those are relevant to simply walk on both sides of our streets and experience that, because it's not the same. And when we were looking at the neighborhoods and looking at your wonderful maps, the fact that this was a single-family zoned neighborhood is part of why we chose this house. It was really important to us, and it still is. And I've really loved living in Portsmouth in the short time we have, partially because it really feels like people are working together as a community and really trying to take care of the community as a whole. And that has meant a great deal to me and to our kids and to us as a family. Someone earlier spoke about this being a covenant, and that feels like an appropriate word to me. So I thank you for please considering how this will impact us, both the decision we so recently made and also what we believed when we were buying this house and hope for living in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak to, for, or against?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'll be brief. Tim Phoenix. A couple of things. One, were the board to approve this project, we certainly would agree to a stipulation that that rear area would be left in its current condition. Secondly, it is our opinion and my experience as a practicing attorney for close to 40 years that when you're looking at the consideration for variances, you look at the overall neighborhood. The fact that something's in a different zone or is a different kind of building is a factor for the board to consider. So you can't, in our opinion, look just at the 5 or 6 house lots that are in this particular strip, one of which doesn't meet the density requirements. In fact, I believe the Tidewatch doesn't meet the density because it's an SRA, which is one building on a lot, if I understand correctly. So we tried to do something that would give us 4 units instead of 3 in a road and cutting that is relatively consistent with the area. Not necessarily right next door, right behind us, but as I said, if you go down the street a couple of tenths of a mile, you've got numerous houses on small lots that are the density of those is less than the 15,000 square feet required. The other thing I just characterize, and if I had to do over again, I probably wouldn't say it quite the way I did, which is my point was that the price of these houses as condos is going to be more affordable than if you had 3 single-family homes. I wasn't calling it affordable housing. I'll comment for my expert, Brian White, and comment that he didn't tell me this, but my response to the comments about him mentioning things in Dover and Durham is, normally we don't, but he also said there's no exactly comparable things that he could find in Portsmouth. So he was using other examples of where things happened. Similar units were built next to single-family homes, and they were found to be approvable and did not diminish surrounding property values. He's an expert with decades of experience, and we believe he's is the only formal expert opinion that's before you. There's case law that says when that happens, it's got to be tough to not follow it. Just in summary, I've laid out my position, our position to begin with. We disagree, although we respect the position of the neighbors and the respectful way that they have approached this. We believe that this makes sense in this particular area for the reasons I've previously stated. Unless you have any other questions, I'll sit down.
Thanks. 2 for or against?
Madam Chair, board members, again, Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. I'd like to just reiterate 3 points having to do with the requirements for a variance. This variance, as I think I've pointed out, is contrary to the public interest, and it doesn't observe the spirit of the ordinance. It doesn't provide substantial justice because the benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by harm to the general public. I believe, in my expert opinion, is 43 years, multiple decades as a real estate broker, selling residential real estate, that it will diminish the value of the surrounding properties. And most importantly, the hardship here has to be with the land, not anything else, not the money, not the whatever. There is no hardship with that lot. It's the same as every other lot on that street. And for those reasons, I would ask you to deny this variance.
Thank you. Last call. 2 for or against? Okay, seeing nobody rise, the public hearing is closed. And what do we have to say?
Okay, so
Go ahead, Ms. Murchison.
So I will not be supporting this variance application for a few reasons, just to kind of get the conversation going. Attorney Phoenix is a fine attorney, but I think there's a couple areas where his argument fails. This is an eclectic mix of zoning, but that's all, eclectic mix of housing types, but that's all by zoning. The Sagamore Court is a garden apartment manufactured housing. The Tide Watch is in the single residence A, but it is a planned unit development, again allowed by zoning because it's over 10 acres. And the recent application that we had for Luster Watch was, we allowed perhaps 2 more units. We allowed more units on that lot than were allowed. However, that was a commercial use, and that was actually bringing the lot into compliance with the surrounding areas. I think and another argument for the hardship is that this lot is bigger than most of the surrounding areas, the surrounding lots. The lot right next to it is 1.7 acres, which is bigger than this subject lot of 1.4 acres. The lot two lots over is 1.5 acres. I think with the configuration, probably very difficult to do this kind of development there. I think, this is a C of single residence B district. There's all single residences on there. This would be the only one that would be a duplex. It looks like a complex. There's a lot of parking that would be required for it. I think it's really out of character with the surrounding area. And I just don't find that there's a hardship for allowing more than one freestanding dwelling and also 4 dwelling units on the lot. 4 dwelling units, duplexes are only allowed in the general residence A, B, and C, and garden apartment and manufactured housing districts. They're not allowed in single residence. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting it.
Would you like to make a motion by any chance?
Well, I want to hear what everybody else says.
Would anyone else like to say? Mr. Rayam, it's you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this application, a couple things. One is that, as Ms. Margerson pointed out, the Luster King property actually is single residence A, which is more restrictive than the single residence B. It's actually a 1 acre parcel and 1 acre per dwelling unit. So in some ways, I mean, there are arguments to be made that that relief could be had for having multiple units on a single family lot if it's exceptionally large enough. I do think that there is some potential for hardship with what's being asked for here. It is, as the applicant has noted, 4 times larger than what is required in the zoning ordinance. That said, I'm not entirely sure that necessarily means you get 4 units on it. And I think really, while an argument could be made for hardship, I do see this falling down on at least 2 other criteria, maybe a third. And that's really coming down to granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance. As the applicant's representative has indicated, those two often come together, but it really talks to what is the general characteristic of the neighborhood. And I think what's being proposed for here has, with the sets of duplexes, and basically what they're asking for is to create 2 identical buildings that they kind of already admit are so kind of out of the character of the neighborhood that they want to make sure that they put plenty of screening in front of them, because they're up on a hill, they're going to be very visible, but we're going to put lots of screening in front of them, so you won't see this sort of unsightly thing that we're trying to put in behind there. And so I think that's our first indication that this really is not in keeping with the spirit of what this overall neighborhood is trying to look at. And I think the shape of the property in particular drives a lot of that. Yes, it is a large lot, but it's also long and relatively narrow. So you're talking about putting these 2 structures at an angle to the street. I'm not even sure the planning board would accept that if it were ever to go before them, but I certainly think it's the first sign that you're not really in keeping with what we're trying to accomplish here. The design's art form plans are called peekaboo. I think they're a lot more than just peekaboo here. This is pretty significant structures that you're talking about that are going to be, despite all the screening that you might want to attempt to put in front of them, are just not going to disappear. That said, is there some way that you could put more than 1 dwelling unit on this? I think perhaps. I think a few years ago, this board saw an imaginative design on Broad Street for a very similar lot, very deep but relatively narrow, where the applicant did something along the lines of creating a structure up in the front of the property that looks like a single-family home, and then sort of really hiding some smaller units toward the back of it. Something like that might be more presentable and more in keeping with the characteristics of the neighborhood. So at least as you're going by, and from the appearance from the road and from the butters overall, you're going to have a better sense of that this is a structure that keeps the spirit more alive than what's being proposed here. The other part is the applicant, as we often have, sort of says, well, I can do this other thing, and I can divide it up into 3 lots and make that happen. Okay, perhaps that is the case. I still think there's significant hurdles in front of the Technical Advisory Committee and the Planning Board towards trying to get that proposal done. It does create a very small, workable building area in the front of the property. Also, as noted on the plans, there's significant ledge issues on the back, which once upon a time was an inhibition to being able to build in Portsmouth. The value of property now is such that that's less of an inhibition than it used to be. But maybe the applicant can convince the planning board to allow that to happen. I can't say for certain, but I don't think. I think that would be a more preferable end than what's being proposed here. So, with that, I don't think it meets our criteria.
Anybody else? Are we ready for a motion? Mr. Mann.
I will make a motion to deny the petition.
If
I get a second, I'll speak to it.
I'll second.
Okay.
I don't see the hardship. I don't see that there's any special conditions to this particular lot relative to the other lots. It's bigger than a couple. It's smaller than a couple. 140 feet width is plenty width for them to, as Mr. Rayom suggested, that they could put a 3-house subdivision in there and not even move the first house because they have over 40 feet there. You only need 20 feet for a driveway. Would they need a variance from the lot line? Possible, but that's plenty of room to put 3 15,000 plus square feet single-family homes. You know, with all due respect to their alternate, it's possible. So I really don't see the hardship. That and the fact that we have a quirk in the zoning in that if any land use boards approves application request that requires a demolition, it nixes any abutter's right to appeal that demolition because a land use board granted it. So that I'm not going to support any application that involves demoing a single-family home when that removes any abutter's right to appeal. So, for those reasons, I made the motion to deny.
Does the second have anything to add?
I would just reiterate that I also do not think that this property is any hardship. It can be reasonably used in the way in which it's zoned. There's a single-family house on it now. It is completely in conformity with the zoning ordinance, and by granting this variance, it would be out of conformity in a significant way. So that's also has a spirit and an intent problem as well.
Is there any further discussion, comments before we vote? Mr. Rayom?
Yeah, I'll say I'll be supporting the motion, although I disagree with some of the arguments that were made. I mean, I do think there is an argument here for hardship. I think it fails on other criteria. I also don't know if first of all, the demolition committee requirement is its own separate ordinance. It is not part of our zoning ordinance. But I don't know if we can necessarily tie our approval or disapproval to a completely separate ordinance. But with that, I do think that it fails and does not meet other criteria.
Any other comments? Okay. I also am going to vote in favor of this motion because in this case, I think a denial will provide a benefit to the general public. I do really see those 2 family homes, the way they're sitting on the lot, I think will change the way this neighborhood feels. And therefore, I will support the motion. So if there are no further comments, a yes vote denies the petition, and I am starting down there just to shake things up. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rayom?
Yes.
Ms. Marchson?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are denied. Okay. That means that the next petition for this evening is. Just gonna wait till.
Wait till the crowd simmers down.
They're crowd noises. We're waiting a minute.
Could everyone please?
You may want to ask people to quickly leave and be quiet doing so we can continue our business.
Okay.
I would ask them to please leave.
Excuse me, could you people please take this outside so we can continue? Thank you. The next item of business is old business. Item A, the request of Catherine Waldwick and Bryn Waldwick, owners for property located at 30 Parker Street. Whereas relief is needed to demolish and remove the existing shed and covered porch and construct a new attached shed with a covered porch, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to permit a 45% building coverage where 35 is allowed. 2, 2-foot right side yard where 10 is required, and C, 2-foot rear yard where 20 feet is required. And 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming structure or a building to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 126, Lot 27, and lies within the General Residence C District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Good evening, Ann Whitney. I'm the architect for the project, and the owners are sitting back there if you have any questions for them.
Okay.
So basically, this is quite a lovely old property. It's a 3-story brick mansard on a very small lot. We're going to be doing a lot of renovations to the existing structure, but there's an existing little shed that's in real disrepair on in that corner that's sitting right on the property line. What we're proposing to do is to take that one down and increase the setbacks to 2 feet on both sides and create a new shed with a porch passageway. Right now, you come in the driveway and that's a really exposed doorway if you look at the site plan. So we'd like to be able to have a little bit of enclosure for access into that side door, which is a primary door for coming off the driveway. And then having a little slightly larger new shed just for, it's a good sized property and there's very little storage just for, you know, recycling, garbage, bicycles, baby carriages, that sort of thing. So, you know, the other change that just affects the building coverage is on the other side of the building. There's a 1-story enclosed porch that we're just going to get rid of because it's never been heated and it's kind of run down. If we go to the second page, up on the one you were just at. Yeah, up on that upper left corner shows that little 1-story porch that we're taking down. The other photos show there's an existing door. All the doorways on this old brick house have a transom light above it. So I was trying to keep that transom and do a roof line that would encompass both the passageway and the shed. And we've postponed this a couple times. We've been trying to work with the neighbors on this. And a couple of things that we've done is originally I had, if you look at the cross section there, it's kind of an asymmetrical gable. I'm trying to make the roof line as low as it can be and still incorporate that transom light so you can see that. The other thing we did was original project had just a straight gable going across if you look at the right side elevation with the doorway. And in speaking with the neighbors, they were concerned with the height of that sticking up. They have a patio just on the other side. And so we decided to hip that portion of the roof to push the height of the shed back away from their little outdoor space there. And in further discussion, there were some concerns about drainage and gutters. So we're going to be guttering a lot of the site work on this site once we get going. If you look at that middle photo, that driveway is in pretty rough shape. So we're going to be probably removing that pavement and regrading it to, right now it does slope towards Parker Street, but also slopes towards the neighbors. So I think, in reworking the driveway, we're going to be able to solve some of those drainage issues that they were concerned about. So that's basically, sure. The location of this shed is such that I can still maintain 2 parking spaces on the driveway. That's why it's pushed to the back of the lot. And, you know, the existing residence is non-conforming in almost all ways in terms of setbacks. So the criteria for the variances are not contrary to the public interest in that many properties in this neighborhood are non-conforming to building area and setbacks. The new shed porch structure is located to maintain parking and provide protected access to the side door. Variance is consistent with the spirit of the ordinance in that it will allow this small footprint change, which will add needed access and storage space without adversely affecting abutters in the neighborhood. Substantial justice will be done as the variances will allow this expansion with minimal changes. By getting rid of that other, we're only adding 16 square feet to this site. The variances will not diminish the value of the surrounding properties, and the special condition of this property is the nonconformity of the existing residence and setbacks and building coverages. Are there any questions?
Other questions?
I do have one question.
Yes,
The
please, Mr.
the existing
Rossi.
shed, is it on a foundation or is it just laying on the gravel?
It's just on some cement blocks, and so the new structure, I'm just going to have 4 sonotubes, not going to have a foundation. It's just going to be 4 cement footings, and then it'll tie into the existing house.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak in opposition to this petition?
Good evening, members of the Planning Board. My name is Daphne Chaveris, and I've been a resident at 40 Parker Street for over 20 years, and I'm a direct abutter of 30 Parker Street. I'm here to address 3 specific variances outlined in the proposal. Granting the variance would not diminish the value of the surrounding properties. A variance is necessary to enable a reasonable use of the property, and there's no hardship. I just would like to express my concerns about the property structure being only 2 feet away from my property line, given the ordinance is 10 feet. The height of the proposed shed structure is not clearly outlined in the plans. However, the height appears to be 4 inches higher than my property fence at 11 feet wide and only 2 feet away from the property line. The mass of the proposed structure raises concern for me because its potential impact on how it will make me feel boxed in and compromising the overall openness in the yard. My property is situated at the lower elevation on the hill. Given the drainage patterns, the water naturally flows in my direction. So the size of the structure and the placement of the downspout on the proposed structure is in close proximity to my fence. And I'm just concerned about water runoff from the proposed structure onto my property, especially when it turns to ice. I do understand my neighbor's need for storage, although the ordinance requires a 10-foot setback. I think it's reasonable that the proposed structure be 2 to 3 feet away from my property line, and would like to see the proposed structure no higher than the current existing structure. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, did you happen to see the picture of, I had put it online. May I send it?
You may.
Is it right? So this is just my perspective right now from.
We can't hear you.
Yes, we have this, now you tell us about it.
So the picture just shows the side yard in the perspective that I'm currently seeing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in opposition? Anyone else to speak to, for, or against?
I just have a couple things.
Tell us who you are again,
Oh, yeah,
please.
I'm sorry, Ann Whitney, back again.
Thank you.
You know, on the drawings, I'm showing a plus or minus, you know, the 12-foot height. And then basically I'm projecting from the top of the existing 8-foot fence to the eave line of the hip was 2 feet. And instead of plus or minus, I added a little bit, we would not exceed that. That would be the most that we would exceed, that it would be no higher than 12 feet and no higher, than those two plus or minus dimensions. The 2 feet above, the fence is kind of tilted, so.
Let me just, how does that height compare with the existing shed?
The existing, I don't have the exact written height, but the peak, if you go back to the sheet with the photos on it.
Page 32 of our
The
packet.
baby can stay. Excuse me, the baby can stay.
Sounds like a happy.
If we can go back to the,
Oh, sorry.
Page 32 of our packet, I think.
I didn't share it. There we go.
yeah, the one with the photos, if you
Yes.
could blow that up, yeah. You can see the dashed line, sort of heavier, darker dashed line is the profile in both elevations of that existing shed.
Okay.
It's a very small shed. It's very low to the ground. There's no way we could maintain that and then still be able to have a covering over that doorway.
Okay.
Yep. From the peak of that shed to the eave of the hip is a foot. It's a foot higher.
Okay.
So it's going to have a little bit of an impact, but because of the way the roof, with the hip, the high part of that roof is 6.5 feet from the property line.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
And then the other thing in our discussions, we've been thinking just with this, that we would be willing to do more than a drip edge, but a deeper drip edge. And if you wanted that to be a stipulation, that basically we'd come out 18 inches from the perimeter of the footprint of the shed portion and go 18 inches down, and so the gutter would dump into that, which would contain, water up to, 4 total amount of runoff from like a 4-inch rain, which is very, it happens these days, but it's not a general occurrence. And again, I want to stress that we are going to be regrading and working on the drainage from the driveway out to Parker Street. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. 2, 4, or against?
Hi, I'm one of the 2 owners. I just wanted to mention that we have gone back and forth a couple of times where we're trying not to just do this sort of without collaboration from the neighbors. So we did go down and see the perspective that you're getting in that image. If you look at the middle image on the bottom, we tried to hip the roof back like that. So, it is higher than the existing structure, but we really are making like a good faith effort basically to have it kind of not feel much taller. You can see parts of it, but it doesn't really box in the neighbor's property. It's sort of meant to kind of fade away and give the same openness that they have in their patio. That was basically in our discussions that we went back and forth a few times on the design, trying to do the best we could while still having an appreciable shed to use. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 2, 4, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed. Mr. Ram?
I actually have a question for city staff, if that's
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I just want to understand the thinking here, because if this was an accessory structure, the setback requirement would be 5 feet, I believe, but we're comparing it back to the full 10 feet and 20 feet off the rear yard. Is that the reason? Because of the connector to the building? Is that the reason why you guys are treating it that way?
Yes, because it is actually connected. It's part of the primary structure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Anybody? No?
Anyone want to make a motion?
I'm going to make a motion soon if you guys don't. Really?
Go ahead, Jody.
Your first motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to move to approve the variance as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Rossi.
Taking items 1 and 2 together, 233.21 and 233.22, there is no public interest in preventing the replacement of the shed. The current shed is very much in disrepair. It is unsightly, if the property owners don't mind my saying so. And replacing it would certainly not diminish any aspect of the public interest. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. There is no loss to the public that would outweigh the loss to the applicant should this variance be denied. And granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. I did listen attentively to the comments made by the abutter. I do think that because of the hip roof design and the way it slopes away from the fence, the part of the shed that's closest to the fence is really not going to be that much higher than what exists there now. Therefore, I can't really see it having a substantive impact on the value of the neighboring property. And then literal enforcement, that the hardship provision, the property, one of the variances that is being requested is the rear lot setback, and the property is very oddly shaped. There is a kind of a corner missing out of that portion of the lot, so that such that the setback would actually be probably pretty close to 10 feet if the lot were of regular shape instead of having this corner taken out of it. And because of that special condition of the property, I do believe that there is a hardship of the property in that putting this shed here where it makes sense because it can connect to the doorway into the house. I think that is a hardship that allows for that setback variance. And as regards to the other setback to the side yard, that's no different than what is currently in place, and therefore that also constitutes a hardship of the property as it exists today relative to this proposal. So on that basis, I suggest that or propose that we approve the variance application.
Thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that this is a extremely small lot that is the size of some homes themselves. And despite that, the owners made a good faith effort to maintain the light, air, and privacy of the abutter. The only thing actually visible over the fence is a roof line as opposed to windows or doors looking onto the neighboring property.
Thank you. Are there any comments before we vote? Okay. A yes vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Ram. I need Eisenbeck.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to support the motion. I've actually had an opportunity to be in this home before under previous ownership. I was actually told that it belonged to a magician at one point in time, so I don't know if there's any strange and magical things that happen in that building. But the setbacks are pretty small. I do appreciate the fact that it is improving it somewhat for the right side yard, which is probably the most negatively impacting on one of the abutters. On its face, the fact that it's seemingly asking for a lot of relief 20 feet, 10 feet. I think as city staff explained, it's really because of this, small linkage that suddenly in our zoning ordinance, it changes the setback requirement, which admittedly it still wouldn't meet the 5 foot that's required for an accessory structure. But it certainly is a far less relief than what would initially at first glance appear to happen. I do agree with Mr. Rossi a little bit. There's, some of the unique jogging of the property is sort of contributing to it. I think the applicant's representatives made a pretty good argument about, being able to maintain the paved drive, and this is sort of the natural location for it. And then the connection to it is sort of driven by this little outcropping off the back of the property that sort of sets this up to be a logical place to sort of create an entryway into the property, and then continue to have what is an existing shed, very somewhat slightly taller to sort of bring it into conformance and from a aesthetic and architectural point of view to bring it into the rest of the home. So I do think ultimately it is a reasonable request, and I will support it.
Mr. Metzler.
I would just add that permitted work isn't allowed to increase any stormwater runoff on neighboring properties, so that would be an important factor. And if anything, it sounds like there's going to be made efforts to improve that.
Thank you. Okay. If we're all set, then we will vote. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. Okay. The next item of business is new business A, the request of 2422 Lafayette Road Associates LLC. It's not clear, is it? And doing business as Waterstone Retail Owner, the CO, for property located at 2454 Lafayette Road, whereas relief is needed to conduct a motor vehicle sales storefront, which requires the following. 1, a special exception from section 10.440, use number 11.10, to allow motor vehicle sales, which is permitted by special exception. Said property is located on Assessor Map 273, Lot 3, and lies within the Gateway Corridor District. Hi.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Attorney John Boson, and I represent the applicant. Applicant seeking to lease 3,230 square feet of retail space at the Portsmouth Green Plaza to Tesla for a Tesla sales gallery. This is retail space that's directly next door to the McKinnon Supermarket. The property is located in the G1 zoning district. With me tonight is Mike Seeger from Tesla and also Kelly Burke from the Wilder Companies that manages the plaza. As I mentioned earlier, this will be a Tesla sales gallery. In the gallery, they'll have several demo models for customers to come in and view. They can learn about Tesla cars. They can take a car for a test drive. They can even purchase a car from this location. If a car is purchased, though, from this location, it's not delivered there. Delivery would take place at a Tesla service and delivery site. The closest service and delivery site to Portsmouth is in Peabody, Massachusetts. So they would buy a car here, or they buy it online, essentially, on the online portal, and it's delivered to Peabody. At the Tesla Gallery in Portsmouth, they'll also contain information about Tesla charging products and Tesla solar panels. The storefront will be an 8-foot wide entrance door that will provide for intermittent access for vehicles to come in and out of the storefront. Once those vehicles are inside, they're not going to be rotated too often. Tesla estimates they'll rotate these vehicles in and out of the showroom a few times a year. Access in and out of the showroom will be made possible through use of a temporary ramp. Motor vehicle sales is permitted in the G1 zone by special exception. So with that background, I'd like to walk through the special exception criteria. First, the use here, motor vehicle sales, is allowed by special exception. Second, the proposed use will pose no hazard to the public or adjacent properties on account of potential fire, or explosion or release of toxic materials. No explosive or accelerants will be stored on site. There won't be any repairs or service work done on site. So vehicle spills are not anticipated to happen. In the unlikely event that something like that would occur, the fluids would be disposed of properly in accordance with industry standards. Next, to be no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business or industrial districts, on account of the location or scale of buildings or other structures, parking areas, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutants, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. To that point, this location is already an existing fully developed shopping center. At most, there's going to be 2 handsome new Tesla vehicles parked outside as well. So we'll have 2 inside, 2 outside. There won't be any other outdoor storage, excuse me, of products or materials or equipment outside other than those 2 vehicles. The proposed use as a Tesla gallery will not produce any odor, smoke, gas, dust, noise, glare, heat, or vibration. The building itself is already existing, so just minor tenant fit-up is required. There won't be any detriment to property values or change in the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. There also won't be the creation of any traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic in the vicinity as a result of the Tesla gallery. This proposal is for retail use in a retail shopping center that has more than adequate parking. Next, there'll be no excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police or fire protection, or schools. In fact, none of those services will be impacted by this proposal. And finally, this project will not increase stormwater runoff onto adjacent properties or streets. So for all these reasons, we do believe that the special exception criteria are met, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions? Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know certainly with most traditional motor vehicles with that have gasoline in them, there's certainly in like a normal garage, there's special precautions about separating that off from living areas. For this particular use, is there any concerns with having to put like special barriers or anything between the section of the building that you're proposing to use and the adjoining uses that, like a restaurant and other certainly non-motor vehicle related uses?
Not to my knowledge, but let me ask the experts here, maybe either Kelly or Mike know if there's any special requirements.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Burke, and I'm with the Wilder Companies. We have the managers, as John indicated. Our offices are based out of Boston, Massachusetts, 800 Boylston Street. I'm not an architect, but this is a business classification, so it would not require any additional, provisions at the demising walls or at the exterior walls.
Okay, thank you. And then for other Tesla dealerships, indoor storage of their vehicles has not presented any unique challenges being an electric vehicle or anything like that?
It is not. In fact, we went through that today with the Tesla folks, and no issues.
Okay. And then I guess one final question is if I may, Madam Chair. So you're proposing about just under 3,500 square feet. Is there any concern if there was interest in the board limiting the allowable showroom square footage to some number roughly around that number, just to prevent this what's being granted here from being converted into something far more significant than what you're proposing, because the special exception would run with the land? Is there any concern from your client if the board would do something like that?
You mean limit the amount of vehicles that can be stored inside?
Well, no, I'm just thinking total square footage for the interior showroom.
I mean, the proposal before you is only for 32.
Yeah.
If there were any change, we'd have to come back before this board and seek your permission anyway.
Agreed. There would be a belt and suspenders kind of stipulation, but just for argument's sake, instead of then now taking over another area next to it with twice as many vehicles or.
So the model, and this is what I learned today, is that the model for these sales galleries are there are 5 of them being proposed in New England, 2 in New Hampshire, 1 in Portsmouth, and 1 in Salem, and they're small. The intent is to actually not take up a lot of space. So our generation went to a car dealer and there was a big floor plan and a whole bunch of cars to choose from. That's not the model now. The model is there are basically 4 Tesla models that are available now to a consumer. They can be changed online with variations. So the model is to have those 4 cars on site, 2 inside and 2 outside.
Yeah, and I fully understand what your client's model is, and maybe it's the way of the future for all vehicle sales. My fundamental concern is somebody using the special exception that we're granting here today to do something very different. I understand that planning department probably would force them to come back. They're very diligent about it today, but in the distant future, things could be different. That's my only question.
Could we stipulate as part of the approval that we would certainly seek your permission, would make that a condition, that we wouldn't do it without seeking your permission? Because there are no plans to expand beyond that now, unless I'm wrong. I hate to foreclose that opportunity, but we'd obviously seek your permission rather than just try to get it administratively approved.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rossi?
Yeah, I guess my question is maybe a little bit more technical about Teslas and fire hazard. It is known to happen, and one of the criteria for approving a special exception is that the proposed use will pose no hazards to the public, and let's see, also that would pose no fire hazard. Is there anyone here?
I can tell you all about that, because I learned all about it today.
Well, I'd love to be educated, please.
I have my Tesla folks here to help me in case I can get
That's
it wrong.
great, please proceed.
But the Tesla vehicle is actually much more safer than a regular combustion vehicle. And the statistics are that there is a fire on a Tesla vehicle, 1 for every 210 million miles traveled, compared to a gasoline-powered vehicle where there's 1 fire for every 19 million miles traveled. So the Tesla vehicle is actually much safer from a fire explosion standpoint than a regular vehicle. Because we all hear about the Tesla vehicles and the batteries, but statistically speaking, they are safer. Under normal usage, these are lithium-ion cells. They don't evolve gases. They will only emit gases if that battery is really badly abused. So it's not likely to happen in a showroom. It's not likely to happen certainly unless there's an abuse, and it's a very rare thing to occur on the road. Mike may want to add to that, but.
My name is Mike Seeger. I'm a general manager for Tesla. I oversee a couple of the locations in Massachusetts. The one thing that I will mention as well is this is a very common design for us overall. We're in many different shopping centers in Massachusetts alone. I help oversee the Boylston Street location in downtown Boston, where we have 4 vehicles on the interior there. And we do have a location at the Natick Mall in Natick, Massachusetts, where we have vehicles inside as well. And that's much more, this would actually be much easier to get vehicles in and out of. But in my time, I've been with the company for 5 years. We've never experienced any sort of event or anything like that. So, obviously the statistics, as well as my experience, I think, it's an extremely safe thing to have in this location.
When a lithium-ion battery does catch fire, are there any special things that need to be done to extinguish it? Will the facility be equipped with halon, or what is done to guard against that eventuality or potential event?
Yeah, so I will, I'm not sure what the actual location will be equipped with or anything like that. I'll say The locations that I am familiar with have their standard sprinkler systems, things of that nature, in the event that something may happen. But I am not 100% sure in terms of the build out of this location, what it will have on the interior.
Would the vehicles be being charged within the facility, or is that all done out of the facility?
No, so we can charge the vehicles on a regular 110 outlet. So typically, closing up process is plug the vehicle in. It'll get a slow trickle charge overnight just to ensure as customers are coming in on a daily basis, they can interact with the vehicles on the interior of the building with a sufficient charge.
Thank you.
Ms. Murchison.
So, my question is, I have a question for staff and a question for Attorney Bozen. For Attorney Bozen, so you're saying that the cars will be swapped out just a few times a year?
Correct.
So coming out of the storefront and then going into the parking lot?
Yes.
So, now, and, I mean, that's a little bit unique because it's going to go right out into a roadway. Now, my question also for city staff is, how does the cars that are going to be parked outside in the parking lot, is that outdoor storage? I mean, I guess they're not considered materials, or?
The way I understand it is that it would be an update to the site plan. So it would be taken into account for the deficit in parking, those 2 parking spaces, and the infrastructure would go before city staff for either an amended site plan, an administrative amended site plan, or before TAC and planning board for a formal process. That's a great question as far as if it's outdoor storage. It is a car in a parking space. This is not something that I've had to encounter. If you would like me to look into it further, I'd have to consult my colleagues.
If the rest of the board agrees, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't think I can ask you individually, so. And I mean, the thing is, this is allowed by special exception in the gateway area. If the applicant meets the special exception criteria, we're commanded actually to give them the special exception. The issue is that this isn't a strip mall, so it's a little weird. I realize there's not going to be very many cars on site, but it's next to a supermarket and a pet store. It's just, I think when people think of motor vehicle sales, they think of large lots like Toyota and whatnot. So it's kind of a little hard for me to conceptualize it here in this space. So
I just want to say, our own Newington Mall has a whole car showroom in there. So it's not as unique as,
I haven't been there in a while.
well, it's pretty empty now, so it's got cars.
That's right, there are vehicles in the Newington Mall. I
Yeah.
walked through there. I was surprised to
just
see
a
it,
fact.
but they are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do think this is a good use for the space. We think it'll be, we also think it'll be well received by the public. We're excited, I know the Tesla folks are excited to be here. I was excited to work on this project. I hope you guys feel the same way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Public hearing is closed. You looked at a very questioning look, Mr. Rayo.
No, Madam Chair, I would actually be prepared to make a motion.
Please do.
So I would make a motion to approve the requested special exception with 2 stipulations, and I'll see if I get a second for it or not. One is that the showroom be no greater than 3,500 square feet, and the second being that the site plan amendment be routed through both Technical Advisory Committee and Planning Board. You said is the full site plan amendment. So that's my motion.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll start with my reasons for the 2 stipulations that I talked about. As I had indicated, this is a whole new concept that we're seeing kind of for the first time of this sort of like just this little sales room area. Then you go in and you check the vehicle out and buy it separate from that. My concern is and I do understand. I think our current planning staff is very, very good at making sure that if it was increased in usage in any way, shape, or manner, they would run it right back through this board. I'm adding the stipulation as sort of a belt and suspenders and maybe a couple other things that hold up pants way of just making sure. I am fearful that someone could take the approval that we're providing today and doing something very different with it. And I think there's been a lot of work, especially with the Gateway District, to kind of make this whole plaza something very different, a combination of residential and commercial uses that is more in keeping with each other. This is sort of the first, it's kind of an outlier to that. And I just want to make sure that it's kept in the sort of box that that is being asked for here and not expanded upon. The second is I do think there's some legitimate questions about the nature of the safety associated with this type of use in this location with it being kind of different. And I do think that having an opportunity to go through the full process of having the technical advisory committee, which does include city staff members with expertise on concerns about potential for fire and building codes, all those kinds of things, can bring that expertise into the review to make sure that we are in fact not going to significantly change anything or present a new danger that we don't fully maybe grasp at this board. So with that, just going through the criteria, sorry, I have my sheet here. It's provided, this is provided as a permitted special exception, no hazards to the public or adjacent property on the account of potential fire explosion or release of toxic materials. So I think this was the one that I had the most sticking point with, and some of the other board members had as well. And that's why I do think running this through the technical advisory committee, it's very important to make sure that that is in fact validated by experts, that it isn't. I understand that the applicant has provided us some information that makes me feel somewhat better about it. I think that adds in the final check mark that tells me, yep, I think we can clearly say that it's going to meet that criteria. No detriment to property values in the vicinity or changing the essential characteristics. So this is still a plaza. This is kind of a unique use in the plaza, something different, but it is relatively small through this additional stipulation. It won't be greatly expanded upon. And I think the 2 parking spots in front, another thing that can be taken a look at through the site plan amendment process of just making sure that the reduction of those and that it's not considered a storage. I certainly don't think it would be an unsightly storage. Certainly 2, essentially new vehicles being parked out front and being charged is, I don't think meets the unsightly criteria, and will also be looked at through technical advisory committee. No creation of a traffic safety hazard. Again, the nature of this business, I think, is certainly going to be less than other potential tenants in the spot. It's it's a big plaza already. It has great traffic control within it. So I don't see any additional burden there. No excessive demand on municipal services. Again, the particular use here, slow trickle charge from a 110 outlet overnight is not going to go and particularly tax any of those listed municipal services. And then no significant increase of stormwater runoff. Again, there's no external change to the property. So with that, I think it meets all the special exception criteria with the required stipulations.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes, I'll just add, so motor vehicle sales here are allowed by a special exception, and this is about as modestly done as motor vehicle sales can be done.
Thank you. Yes.
I will just say I'll support the motion. I appreciate the stipulation as to TAC and planning board review about the issue of outdoor storage, whether or not the cars constitute outdoor storage. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes. Mr. Rossi.
I think I would feel more comfortable supporting the motion if there was yet a third stipulation, and that is that this is a permit for EV vehicle sales only, because there are very different hazardous characteristics between EV and internal combustion driven vehicles. And the analysis would apply across both.
Mr. Graham, do you accept that?
As the maker of the motion, I would accept, that a third stipulation that it be for the sale of electric vehicles only. For myself, I'm fine with that.
Yep, I'm fine.
Second accepts it. Okay. Everyone understand the new
I would consider it a
three
friendly amendment.
stipulations? Okay,
Can you
excellent.
state them all again, Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Just kidding.
That's the chair's job,
Really?
but she'll defer it to city staff.
So, only EV vehicles, only 37
3,500 square
square feet, and that it will go before TAC to make sure that the fire,
The full site plan
the full
amendment
site plan,
process, which
yes.
includes technical
Okay, very
advisory
good.
committee and planning board,
Okay.
according to the city.
So, if there are no further comments, then we will vote. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Let me take a break.
Should I call you Vice Chair? Sorry. I will do that if you want.
9 o'clock.
Okay. The next item of business is the request of, and I'm going to call this 8KPH LLC, because I am not sure exactly what you are called, owner, for a property located at 70 Maplewood Avenue, whereas relief is needed to install a freestanding sign which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.125.1.20 to allow 48 square feet of sign area where 20 square feet is allowed. And 2, variance from section 10.1253.10 to allow a freestanding sign to be set back and set back 2.5 feet from the lot line where 5 feet is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 125, Lot 17.3, and lies within the Character District 5 Downtown Overlay District, North End Incentive Overlay District, and Historic District. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Hello, everyone. My name is Terrence Parker of Terra Firma Landscape Architecture. I'm here with Tom Ballin, who's the owner of 70 Maplewood. This is, as you might have surmised, it's the third in the history throughout murals, because the city doesn't have a mural ordinance, so we have to go before you as a sign. And this is most definitively not a sign. It's a screen fence with a mural, and that's what was approved by the HDC, I think it was last December, that we were putting a screen in front of some existing transformers at 70 Maplewood. So this is not a sign, but a mural. So as it relates to the sign ordinance, it is 28 square feet larger than the maximum sign. So that's one of the variances. It's also a freestanding sign, not near a driveway, because there is no driveway where the transformers are, because we're trying to screen the transformers, not create a sign near a driveway. And it's also because the transformers are right on the property line at 5 feet. To screen that transformer, the mural sign has to be within the 5-foot property line setback. So that's why we're here before you today. And as part of the History Through Art process, we're trying to bring forth the character, the fabric of Portsmouth. This sign references the rope walk from the 1700s, the railroads from the 1800s, and Rose Fiandaca, she was the civic activist of the North End that was raised as part of the urban renewal project of the 1960s. So we're trying to make reference to that really important history of Portsmouth. And this is part of the North Enders celebration of the Portsmouth 400. They have embraced this project. So this is part of that Portsmouth 400 that we all know about, trying to bring the history of Portsmouth forth. And this is the way that Tom Ballin has chose to do it. So some of the maps you have there, you can see how this arcs around the transformer. And that transformer is actually if you would call, a trailhead to the pocket park that was approved by the HDC that wraps around the building. So there's a public space between the railroad tracks and the back of this building that has space that's designated for public use. And so this is kind of like right at the cusp of that, to identify where to go into the back of the building to walk around and, you know, appreciate the rear space there. So I don't need to talk about the details of the mural. I think that's self-explanatory. But I would like to point out that this does pass the criteria of the ordinance in that it's not contrary to the public interest. It honors the spirit of the ordinance, and that's observed. Because it enhances the character of the region by promoting Portsmouth's rich history, and it's not located on street frontage, and so therefore it does not create a hazard or a distraction. Substantial justice would be done by approving these variances because there's no obvious harm to the public, and there's actually quite a lot of educational benefit that goes to the public, and this is really a gift from Tom Ballin to the public, because he didn't have to do this. And the values of the surrounding properties are certainly not diminished. There's a mixed-use neighborhood, and there's going to be a big project across the street. So there's no diminution of those property values. And literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship because there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of this ordinance provision and the specific application of this provision on this particular property. So we believe that this is a very reasonable request for the acceptance of the variances that we have designated here. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Other questions? Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking on page 48 of our packet, you do have a picture of the existing site, and there appears to be 2 electrical enclosures there, both green, one with tag on it. But you're showing now just 1 electrical enclosure, from what I can tell, in the area below up with dimension up above. So are those being removed and something new put in its place, or is this? Could you just explain what's happening there?
Well, because of the finances of the project, we chose to screen the one that was closest to the public right-of-way, with the hope that down the road we could, have additional mural fences.
Okay, so both of those sort of electrical enclosures will be staying, but it's the one that's closest to the sidewalk that you're covering up now.
I believe both of this is the technical question that Tom would answer.
Tom Ballin, 233 Vaughan. The small unit is a small transformer that powers some of the rail equipment. The larger box is a switch, which is the high voltage switch that works on the primary loop. If you look in the upper part, there's actually a third box, which is the transformer for the new building. So there's an additional transformer coming in addition to the 2 that are already there.
Okay, so in the area below up with dimensions, sort of the upper illustration, we don't see either of the 2 existing boxes, is that correct?
You see, in the bottom, you see both of the 2 existing boxes, and those are shown at the top of the upper image as well, where it says on concrete pads typical, there's 2 arrows. Yep, those are the 2.
Okay.
Yep.
So they're shown as on concrete, you're just showing the concrete pads for them. And what you're covering is actually a brand new item, a third additional item that's going to be on that corner.
So the new transformer is part of the planning approval. That's already done. We're talking about the screen that's going to screen the corner, which is meant to try and hide all 3 transformers to some extent. So.
Okay. I'm still kind of confused, but I think I'll accept it.
I dare not approach the monitor.
I may be able to help. So if you look at the screen,
yeah,
these are the 2 existing units. These 2 up at the top.
Okay.
This third one down here, it will exist at the end of the project at this location.
Okay.
The screen is going around the existing unit that is closest to the street presently.
Okay, and which is the little small box on the lower illustration of our current situation, and the trees presumably are going to be gone.
Yeah.
as part of this. Okay. And then my one other question is it does appear, but I just want to 100% validate, the orientation of the mural is really sort of at right angle or parallel to the travel way of Maplewood Avenue. So, and my concern there is distraction to passing vehicles is less likely. This is really more oriented toward a pedestrian experience of people on the sidewalk and really should be like less visible to cars. As you're driving in there, you're not going to be like distracted. Oh, billboard, and kind of looking over at it. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's not going to be lit, and that's right near the railroad tracks, so people are slowing down anyway, and there's also a traffic light there, so we feel the same way that it is not a distraction for those reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this petition?
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Bratter, property owner 159 McDonough Street. I followed this project from the very beginning. As you all may know, I go to all the meetings that come with the project. It's a very interesting way to get to know a project quite well. This screening that they're presenting, I think will be a very positive thing because it will cover up, even if it just covers up one of those big green things as you drive down Maplewood Ave, they actually catch your eye. The other thing too is that it'll be a nice little accent because across the street at 2 Russell Street, they're going to be enclosing their, at least they were last time I went to one of their meetings, they're going to be enclosing their parking on the bottom with screening as well as with a mural that has stuff related to the north end. So I think that having this on the one side and then being able to kind of filter across to their walkway on the other side will actually be a really nice addition to that area. And in terms of distraction, I don't think it would be any more distracting than the people that we see on buildings who are historic. The other day I was driving down Court Street. I'm sorry, I don't know the lady's name. I'm terrible with names for those of you who know me. And she's up there, and they were having a tour, so there was a whole group of people standing there. And for a split second, I looked at them, and then I said, oh, watch the road, because this is high pedestrian, because it's right by the senior center there. But I think generally this will be a positive thing, and I'm not sure exactly how big it is compared to those things, but anything that covers those things up and that doesn't paint them, it will be nice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone in opposition? Anyone to, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed. Yes, Mr. McMillan.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Second. Second? Mr. Rossi will second you.
Okay. Going through the criteria, taking items 1 and 2, 10.233.21, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. 10.233.22, granting the variance would observe the spirit of both of these are true. The next one is granting the variance would do substantial justice. That is also true. We're talking about a mural, and unfortunately, we don't have any ordinance for murals. As the applicant said, it's a sign ordinance. And this is clearly not a sign. And it's already been approved by the HDC. They just need the setbacks for where it is to cover up these 2 permanent boxes, which aren't going anyplace. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. That's obviously true. And literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. A, the property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area. That is true. And owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. And the pros use is a reasonable one. Yes, it is. We're just talking about a mural to cover up transformer boxes, and the only reason it's here is because it's slightly closer to the sidewalk than the ordinance provides. The other part of the variance is the fact that it's a mural and not a sign. That's a hardship.
Mr. Rossi, anything to add?
I think that there is published documentation of the historical significance of the woman who's going to be presented on the mural, and I believe that's important to this because as we approve these types of murals, it's going to be important that we are certain of the historical accuracy and relevance of these, and that these murals don't migrate into other territories of various things that could be on them. So I'm happy that this book published by Laura Pope, Portsmouth Women, does include her in it, and satisfied that this is a person of historical significance.
Okay, thank you. Any other, yes, Ms. Marchison.
I will not be supporting this, and that I'm not saying this is not a wonderful mural. It is. It really is. I wonder sometimes why it's not facing the pocket park so that people can actually read it. I think it will be distracting to drivers going by. But if something is not in our zoning ordinance and a mural is not in our zoning ordinance, then we are not supposed to be approving variances for it. We had this situation with, I guess, the art studio with a very nice woman who wanted to open up an art studio in her home, but we had no art studio in the zoning ordinance, and therefore we were not supposed to approve an art studio. So I will not be supporting it for those reasons.
Any further discussion? Okay, so a yes vote does approve the sign / mural. Mr. Metzen?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Vice Chair Marchison?
No.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you are approved.
Madam Chair, can we take a 5-minute break?
We certainly can. Okay, we are back in session. And moving on to
Item D.
new business D. The request of Port Submarine Memorial Association owner for property located at 569 Submarine Way, whereas relief is needed to construct an addition to the existing building to substantially increase the use, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.440, use number 3.40, to allow a museum where the use is not permitted. Said property is located on Assessor Map 209, Lot 87, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Hi.
Good
Welcome.
evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Kevin Baum. I'm with the law firm of Hopeful, Gormley, Phoenix and Roberts, or Hopeful, Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts. Don't tell Tim I just demoted him there. He had a tough night already.
Never
With me today is John Shagnon from Ambit Engineering. Ken Herrick and Phil Mock, who are both directors for the Portsmouth Submarine Memorial Association, are here as well, and can answer if you have questions about operations. As I'm sure the board is familiar, this is related to Albacore Park at 569 Submarine Way. The park was originally approved by special exception in 1983. 1985, the USS Albacore was moved up from Philadelphia to its current location, and in 1986, the existing visitor center was constructed, and it's been operating as is since then. It also includes Memorial Park. The existing building visitor center is 1,600 square feet. It houses the various exhibits, artifacts, and supports some of the on-site educational programs. It's also meeting space. The current proposal is to put a approximately 1,500 square foot addition on 1,588 square foot addition on to the existing visitor center to add more exhibit space and also to provide just a better layout and better meeting space. As the members were telling me, the current meeting space is bisected in the middle by a periscope, making it difficult. It's making the property somewhat unique, but also making it very difficult for their use. So this will make the layout much better, much more useful, and also just an overall better visitor experience. But as staff noted, because it is a significant addition to what is already there, we need to come back for a variance because this is a museum use in a residential zone, even though that overall use won't change. A couple other things to note. Parking for museum use under the ordinance is by parking demand analysis, which we provided. Based on that analysis, the peak use, including existing and the proposed building, requires 37 vehicles. There are 37 lined off-street parking spaces available, and if you look towards the site plan, you'll see on the other side of those lined spaces, there's space for up to about 119. Those are unlined spaces, overflow parking. Typically don't get used, but they are available, and they are also used. It's helpful for the buses as well when tours come in. This property, if Steph, if you could go to Exhibit D. So, yeah, this is in a fairly transitional area, both by zoning. As you see, there's a number of different zoning districts that come together, and by use. It is in the SRB zone, but it's adjacent to a business district, General Residence A, across the Route 1 bypass, and waterfront industrial across Market Street. The uses are mixed as well. There's residences to the east and west, again, across the Route 1 bypass to the east, and to the west, it's across on the other side of the parking lot and there's some existing vegetative buffer there to an old subdivision. To the south is there commercial fueling on the bypass, and to the north is the Bohenko Gateway Park. As I mentioned, while the proposed addition will increase the overall square footage of the building, we think the impact is going to be fairly minimal and likely not really even noticeable for the surrounding properties. It is about a 7-acre parcel. It's quite large for the area. So this addition, though it's a big increase compared to what's there, it's a very small increase overall on that lot, and nowhere close to any coverage requirements. Hours of operation will remain the same. Peak use is expected to remain the same, which is primarily summer and weekends. And I think more so the main draw is going to be the USS Albacore, which is going to be unchanged. So we think it's going to create a much better user experience, both for the members and for visitors. But from the outside looking in, the impact should be limited and basically not noticeable. Again, people are coming to see the Albacore, to tour the Albacore. That use isn't going to change. It'll be consistent with the past 35 plus years. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the addition or the use, or just quickly step through the criteria.
Why don't you go through the
And
criteria?
it's a long night. I'll try
see
to
you back question.
be quick. As the board knows, the first two requirements, that the variances aren't contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed, are considered together. The test is whether granting the variance wouldn't unduly into a marked degree conflict with the ordinance such that it violates its basic zoning objectives. Considerations are whether the variance will alter the essential character of the locality or threaten the public health, safety, and welfare. None of those are implicated by this proposal. The use is going to remain essentially the same. Museum use, it's just going to have a better, bigger, nicer, more usable visitor center. It allows the Submarine Memorial Association to make better use of the space, improve the visitor experience. The improvement itself is towards the Route 1 bypass, consistent with the existing improvements and away from the closest residential, which is buffered by the parking lot and some existing landscaping. Access remains the same, Submarine Way between Market Street and Route 1 bypass. And given the parking demand analysis, we think that just bolsters that this addition is not going to create an intensive use or an overly intensive use. Given that, the variance is not going to alter the essential character of the locality or threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice is a weighing test, whether there's a benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant if the variance were denied. There's no real benefit to the public in denying this variance. As I mentioned, we don't believe there'll be any impact to the surrounding properties. It's a modest expansion on a very large lot, but it will have a significant benefit for the park and for the Portsmouth Submarine Memorial Association by allowing them to make much better use of the existing building and to expand its holdings and exhibits for the public. Granting the variance will not diminish surrounding property values. Again, the park itself and the visitor center has been in operation since about 1986. Overall use is not going to change. It is a museum. The primary draw is the Albacore. That is what it has been, what it will stay. We expect little noticeable difference from the neighbors. Most of those residential neighbors, who would be the only ones that I think could possibly be affected, have lived next to that museum given its age, most likely for the majority, if not all, of their period of ownership. So given that, we don't think there'll be any noticeable change, noticeable impact. The overall improvement the addition will improve the museum, will improve the building, and should increase property values. So certainly no evidence that there'll be any diminution of surrounding property values. With respect to hardship, 3 criteria. One is that special conditions distinguish the properties from others in the area. As I mentioned, it is a large property for the area. It's 6.9 plus acres. It is in a transitional area, both in terms of zoning and in terms of the actual uses, with a real mix of residential, commercial, industrial park nearby, and it's on 2 major roadways, one being the Route 1 bypass and the other Market Street, and it has its own submarine way for its own access. So those conditions certainly distinguish it from others in the areas and create special conditions. With respect to the second criteria, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the specific application here. The SRB is a residential zone. Museum use is generally not permitted. That would make sense in many instances. Here, though, given the location, given the long-time use and the location on the bypass on Market Street, it just isn't applicable. The continued museum use makes sense. It is not contrary to the intent of the ordinance. This is not a lot where it will become residential. This board is also permitted to consider existing structures, and certainly those are unique in this situation, which include a submarine and the dry dock area. So we think, given the long time use, its location along both the significant roadways, it is better suited for museum than for single family, and in fact, we believe creates a nice buffer between the industrial uses, those commercial uses from along the bypass to the residential zones, residential properties to the rear. So in light of that, there's no reason to apply the strict use requirements of the SRB district to the property in this case. And lastly, the proposed use has to be reasonable. This is a reasonable ask. It just simply allows the association to improve the existing visitor center, increase its size, improve its usability, and create a better visitor experience. So given those factors, we think that the 5 criteria are met, and we hope you agree and are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Other questions? Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question, and maybe city staff can weigh in, and maybe you talked to it and I missed it. But so when this was originally allowed as a museum use, it was a special exception, and we're now asking for a variance. Did the zoning change, or i.e., what zone it's in change, or was it a change in the zoning ordinance that has moved this from no longer being a special exception?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can't answer. What I can say is it was a special exception at the time in '86. The ordinance now no longer it is prohibited, but I don't know the history of what happened with the change.
Do you know what happened?
I don't know the specifics of why the use was removed from a special exception. I can look into it, but I think the simplest answer is a zoning change.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was always SRB and was a special exception under SRB, or if somehow over time this was moved into SRB for some reason. That's fine. If we don't know the answer, I wasn't sure if it came up during your research in preparation for this variance request.
I did not catch it, but if you give me a second, I can probably.
I will say the history of permitting on this site is long and not particularly clear, but.
Yeah, we have a rather lengthy, this bond, that bond, the submarine got stuck in the way, we got to get it out of the way. There's sort of a long story associated with this. That's fine. If we don't know the immediate answer, I'm okay. You can continue on.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against?
Just to John Shagan, part of the team, not a resident, but in speaking to what Mr. Yuma is talking about with the zoning, I've been involved with the project for a long time. I don't know why it was kept in the zone, but I do know that there are a lot of other properties that contain museums that are now in museum zones. You have that ability in your ordinance, and it might be something for staff to consider moving this project to for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 2, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed. Yes, Ms. Burgess.
I hate to tax Stephanie more than she's taxed right now, but in analyzing this, we have to first determine whether or not this is the expansion of the legal nonconforming use is a substantial change in the nature or purpose, and then go to the variance criteria, or is that part of the variance criteria analysis?
Staff has flagged it as substantial. You, at the board in the past, has found that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
not occurred, but that it, past applications have not reached that substantial level. Staff has flagged it. If you think that it's not applicable, then you can discuss that and make a decision. However, I would say it's probably okay to just move forward with the variance criteria. You don't have to find if you're more comfortable with having a finding and a vote, that's fine. However, I think it's okay to move forward.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It is a substantial expansion, but I think that we have to, I thought that according to the memo that we got in July, that we had to make findings as to the criteria under Attorney McCourt's memo.
Is this finding not made by the directive to construct an addition to the existing building to substantially increase the use?
I don't know.
I guess I'm not clear on your question. Is it that you need to have new findings of fact for the variance?
I don't know. That's what I thought we were tasked to do.
I think you should in that case. Yes.
There you go.
I think it would be cleaner to find findings specific to the request before you.
Meaning as to the variance criteria.
The variance criteria for the request that's before you, seeing as it has come before you because it is substantially changed.
Okay.
The prior reasoning may be different than what you're considering right now.
Okay. All right. So we don't have to make a finding that this is a substantial change. That has already been made by planning staff.
I think so, but again,
No,
another vote is fine with me.
Where would you like to go?
I would like to make a motion to approve the variance request as presented and advertised.
Second.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Rossi.
The overarching consideration is that this is an expansion of a legal non-conforming use. So many of the arguments that were presented about whether this zone supports that use or transition this or that, not really all that relevant. The use already exists. And because the use already exists, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. There is no public interest in discontinuing this use or prohibiting its expansion on this property. The property is large and can certainly accommodate the proposed expansion. Granting the variance would do substantial justice, since there is no loss to the public by expanding the footprint of the building on the property. Any loss to the applicant for not being able to do that would be unjust. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. The proposed expansion is close to Route 1A. It really would not impact any of the properties on that side of the property, and it is buffered by a large parking lot to neighboring residential properties, and therefore it would not really have the ability to diminish the value of those surrounding properties. And again, we're talking about really changing the size of the structure, but not the use. The use already exists. Literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The special condition of the property is that the non-conforming use already exists, and therefore there is no logical linkage between prohibiting this expansion of the building and the provisions of the ordinance.
Thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say, a couple of the criteria that seem, well, one is this a substantial increase in the nonconformity? Of course, substantial is a very subjective term. It's probably one of the most subjective words out there. But I guess in my view of that subjectiveness, they're pretty much looking at doubling the size of this structure. Admittedly, again, relatively speaking to the total square footage of the whole entire lot, a relatively minor increase. But I would say that in my mind it meets the concept of subjectively of a substantial increase in the nonconformance. From a criteria standpoint, this is really, SRB is clearly not the right zone for this to be in. This property is 20 times larger than what is required for a single-family home. This is just simply not where you're going to go and put a single-family home on it. But I think really to the spirit of the ordinance, the big thing is why wouldn't you want a museum in a single residence B? Really, it's traffic. It's being so different from all the single-family uses that are in there. But in this particular case, I think the location of this property, it is physically cut off from the other portions of the SRB district. It's on the very edge of that SRB district. There's not only no roads that connect it, it's really got kind of like an elevation difference as well between it and the the conforming uses for an SRB. So I think that adds to, it's really meeting the spirit of what we're trying to prevent a museum use from being in an SRB district for. And then from a hardship standpoint, again, it's a massively huge property, as noted by the maker of the motion. It's an existing non-conforming use. It's not going to go away. We had an incredibly difficult time getting the albacore there, and then it's not likely to move anytime soon. And then just one final point was I didn't realize that the address for this was 569 Submarine Way. Very clever house address. So with that, I recommend approval.
Okay. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Any comments? Okay, then the yes vote approves the museum addition. Mr. Metzen?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Ms. Marderson?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You're approved. Next, item E under new business. The request of Kate Street Development LLC owner and Buffalo Wild Wings applicant for property located at 360 U.S. Route 1 bypass, whereas relief is needed to install a sign on the northern-facing facade, which requires the following. 1. Variance from Section 10.1271 to allow a sign on the side of a building where there is no public entrance or street frontage. Said property is located on Assessor Map 172, Lot 1, and lies within the Gateway Corridor District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Bill McFadden from Barlow Signs, here on behalf of Kate Street Development, the owner of Buffalo Wild Wings. We are seeking a variance relief from Section 10.1271 for one 49 square foot internally illuminated channel logo for the north elevation of the existing Buffalo Wild Wings building, located at 360 US 1 Bypass, where there is no public entrance. Building identification on the north elevation, where there is no public entrance, is critical because it will allow southbound motorists to identify the restaurant easily and safely before reaching the intersection at Hodgson Way, where traffic would need to turn to access the building. Identifying the building too late could result in a missed turn or the need for a U-turn much further down the road at Greenleaf Ave. The building currently has one non-illuminated logo on the front peak above the public entrance, two sets of small illuminated channel letters that wrap around the front right corner and south elevation, and one small projecting sign on the south elevation, all of which are conforming but are blocked from view and cannot be adequately viewed when traveling southbound. The logo on the front of the building is not able to light due to the nature of its height on the building. We argue that there is no public entrance on the north elevation. Our establishment is service and retail based and relies solely on its patrons and customers for business. We also argue that the public entrance at the front of the building is only feet away from the proposed sign location on the north elevation. The abutting tenant, Convenient MD Headquarters, in the same building, is an employee-based establishment that does not offer on-site services to patients or retail shopping. According to their website and to the New Hampshire Business Review, the Convenient MD Headquarters houses administrative offices, training rooms, IT, and marketing departments, as well as limited space for clinicians to hold virtual appointments, such as telehealth. Yet they have a large illuminated wall sign on the north elevation of the same building, where there is no public entrance. Our client sign is much smaller in comparison and serves an important purpose because it supports the success of their business. We also would like to state that the U-Haul facility next door has arguably more prominent signage and lighting that hinders the public's ability to safely view and identify our establishment in enough time to react and turn at the proper intersection. We do not believe that our sign as proposed is contrary to the public interest, as it allows for early identification and safe wayfinding from the public who are seeking our establishment or simply looking for somewhere to eat. We believe it meets the spirit of the ordinance and does not alter or interfere with the character of the location, neighborhood, and/or the surroundings. The building is a fully approved and permitted commercial facility, and our sign is appropriate for the zone and architectural character of the establishment. We believe substantial justice would be done by granting the variance because there are significant challenges to this site that make the enhanced visibility necessary. Buffalo Wild Wings needs to maintain building identity needed for southbound traffic, and motorists who may not be familiar with this commercial area is detrimental for the business's success. The sign is tastefully designed and placed in a manner that does not encourage or contribute to any visual disarray that the city's ordinance is meant to protect against. It would be an injustice to our client and their business to deny the variance here requested. The proposal will not diminish the value of the surrounding properties, as the additional sign requested is an improvement to the existing conditions and mirror the adjacent Convenient MD sign by its location and style, but is much smaller in size. The sign will not negatively impact any of the neighboring businesses or properties. There are special conditions associated with this property which demonstrate hardship. The development is unique with multiple buildings, semi-complicated entranceways, and irregularly shaped property lines with sightline obstructing conditions, such as the U-Haul facility next door. Granting the variance will prevent unnecessary hardship by allowing for the important identification required to attract and direct the public when traveling southbound, and will allow motorists ample time to identify and determine how safely to make way onto the property. Furthermore, the uses proposed here are reasonable. And I do want to add, in addition, older GPS units are sending people down the street to U-turn at Greenleaf Ave when they can avoid that and now take a left turn onto Hodgson Way to access this property. Also, as well, it is a dark building in the evening. It is very difficult to see. An illuminated sign will assist in identification. We hope the board can understand our important need for variance relief on this agenda item tonight. We look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Are there questions? Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Out of curiosity, I'm looking at page 201 of our packet, the photo that's there. Did somebody already hit your building? It looks like there's a pretty...
There has been some damage to the building, yes.
In the corner there. Okay. And then I just want to validate, like, the size, from the looks of everything, the size of what you're proposing is about the same as what you have on the sort of the front glass-in portion of the structure. It's essentially the same size as that, and that's all you're proposing to put up there.
I just want a logo on that side of the building.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
It's just, I don't know if I missed this, is it internally illuminated?
Yes.
Yes.
What about, aren't there, so the one in the front cannot be internally illuminated? So
Because of where the height of how high it went up.
It's that.
it would be,
It's that sign right there.
I think I'm confused now. The sign would go on the facade that has the convenient MD headquarters.
That is correct. I can approach the screen and point without touching the
You
screen.
may. Don't touch.
Take
the mic if you
mobile
want to
mic
talk
with you,
to us.
if you don't mind. Thank you.
Look, but don't touch.
Touching the screen's an instant denial.
So our proposal is right where the mouse, where the arrow is, right in this area right here. And it's just a logo similar to that. This one is non-illuminated. This will be illuminated.
So you say that the site itself presents problems for you. However, with all due respect, Buffalo Wild Wings chose this site with recognition of the U-Haul and with the limitations of the site. The board has already given you a variance for the one on the other side of the building. It does seem to have a lot of signage and a lot of identification for passing motorists. Granted, they may have to take a few extra steps to get there, but this is a site that your company chose.
If you are correct, heading northbound, it's a non-issue. It's fair visibility for signage, but even I just drove it again this evening, and you just can't see this building or this business until you have passed Hodgson Way, and you'd have to go up and do a U-turn. And we're only asking for a logo. We're not asking for the lettering Buffalo Wild Wings, just the logo.
A question for city staff. So how is it that Convenient MD headquarters has an internally illuminated sign? If it's not a public, if it has the same problems?
We gave them that variance.
Variance.
Oh.
You may not have been there that evening.
I wasn't.
Yeah, we gave them that variance.
Thank you.
That's it. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone to speak in opposition to this proposal? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Then the public hearing is closed. What would we like to do? Ms. Murchison?
I suspect that I probably am of a different mind than the rest of the board, but I will not be supporting this variance request. I was not here when the convenient MD headquarters sign was put up. The ordinance, I mean, there's a whole article on signs in our zoning ordinance. And it is to, not allow for a lot of clutter, a lot of distraction. I do not find, I recognize that this may be challenging for the business, but I do not find that there's any hardship within the land itself that really merits us giving a variance for the internally illuminated logo on the side of the building. So I will not be supporting it.
Anybody else? Mr. Rayham?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to grant the requested variance as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. Mr. Mattson seconded you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so, I'm kind of, I understand where Ms. Marchison is coming from on this. I had some concerns about the convenient MD sign when it came before us as well. I do think there is a hardship here in that this parcel ended up sort of being divided up in a very odd way because the U-Haul didn't want to move and stayed where they were. It is kind of unfortunate. I mean, I'm still not entirely convinced that what the applicant is hoping to have happen is really going to take place. Even if you kind of see it off in the distance, I don't think you'd necessarily put two and two together that you have to turn at Hodgdon and then work your way around through the back end of the property to get to the Buffalo Wild Wings. But again, that's nothing that this applicant or the convenient MD really created. It's sort of a general nature of how this property was developed in full, in conformance with the zoning ordinance. And it's just kind of a unique and perhaps unfortunate byproduct of how that all happened. I think the thing that sells it for me is it's a modest request. Understand it's internally illuminated, but it is at a height where, and in a location where the internal illumination isn't going to negatively impact it. I mean, basically it's going to shine down on the U-Haul, which, as the applicant has pointed out, already has plenty of illumination going on there. If it was facing into the apartments out in the back, or there was a residence right next to it, I might have more concerns. But I think the request is relatively innocuous. I think it will have a slight benefit in that as people go by and they suddenly realize that they're going by the place that they want to be at, they will probably still be forced to take a U-turn or do some other measure somewhere down the road to coming back to it. But that's not the fault of the applicant. That's really just sort of the way this whole parcel got developed. So with that, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest and is in the spirit of the ordinance. Again, it's a relatively small sign. It's internal illumination. What we aren't looking for is incredible amount of sign clutter. I think with this relatively small sign, and even with the previously granted exception variance for the convenient MD, the sign clutter certainly for this overall very wide open area is not excessive. It's not next to a residential area that or facing a residential area and such that it would be negatively impacting those residents. So I think in that sense, it's not out of the spirit of what's going on elsewhere in the neighborhood, and is not violating the fundamental principles of what we're trying to do with the sign ordinance, and in particular with illuminated signs and the size of them. Granted, the variance would do substantial justice. Again, this gives the business owner opportunity to ensure that from all aspects that people can know and understand their business is there. It's not along a roadway, but again, this is sort of the result of this unique way that this parcel ended up being created, it got developed. So with that, I think it's, there's nothing that the general public purposes would say would outweigh the applicant's, desire to go and have this relatively modest sign on that side of the structure. Granted, the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, the surrounding really affected properties are commercial businesses with large signs and lighting of their own, so I don't see any negative there. And then the hardship, again, is this sort of unique relationship of the building relative to the property, relative to adjacent properties, relative to the road, relative to the way that you can access this. I just think it creates a whole series of oddities that is burdening this particular structure on this particular property in such a way that the ordinance doesn't make sense in how it was originally conceived. It's just got a lot of unique characteristics to it because of all of that. And the request is, again, a relatively modest sign that is a reasonable request. So with that, I recommend approval.
Do you have anything to add, Mr.?
Yes, I'll just add that this doesn't threaten public safety, and while it might not help everybody see the sign in advance enough to turn at Hodgson Way, for anyone that it does, that would prevent them from acting erratically after they notice they miss it or having to deal with a U-turn further down.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
I will not be supporting the motion. I think that I was reluctant on the convenient MD sign. Now I think that this is starting to turn into a proliferation of illuminated signage. In one of the first areas of Portsmouth people see when they come off of Route 16 and that area. So I don't think it is consistent with the purpose of the ordinance to allow this. I also think it's almost impossible not to see Buffalo Wild Wings with its current signage. It jumps right out at you. I also think that GPS units will eventually catch on. They're not static, they learn, and eventually this problem will solve itself without the need for additional signage. So I just don't see the hardship, and I will not be supporting it.
All right, so a yes vote approves the sign. I'm going to support it for the same reason we supported convenient MD. And you're right, GPS might catch up. And then we will look, but it's not, even though it is internally illuminated, I don't see that the light is causing light pollution in this particular area of the building or the city. So a yes vote allows the sign. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
No.
Mr. Rayum?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
No.
Mr. Mantle?
No.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So you have your sign. Did you see how I didn't call myself the chair?
Now we say goodbye to David.
Now no one will know who it was. Would you like to be excused at just the right time?
Madam Chair, since it is 10 o'clock in our normal ending time, I don't know if you're going to take a vote for the extending it or not, but as I did previously indicated to you and the city staff, I do have obligations very early in the morning and request not being part of the last two cases.
Well, we understand and have a safe trip.
Thank you. Before my 6.5-hour flight, I would like to get a little shut-eye.
You can just sleep on the plane.
If I could, I would.
Mr. Rayum
We
leaving?
could deny him. Would you like to vote on staying past 10? We have two more.
Yes. I move that we stay past 10.
Second? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain.
Yeah.
Who are you giving that second to?
I think it was Mr.
Mantle. Okay.
Yes. All right. So then, the next item of business is the request of Kate Street Development LLC owner. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's
The
not.
next item of business is the request of Creeley Family Trust, Sean and Andrea Creeley, trustee owners. The property located at 337 Richards Avenue, whereas relief is needed to construct an addition to the existing structure, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow a 12.5 rear yard where 20 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 130, Lot 2, and lies within the General Residence A District.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Attorney Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of Sean and Andrea Creeley, the owners of the property at 337 Richards Avenue. Excuse me if I'm a little raspy tonight, but I'm sort of on the back end of having had the flu, so I've been out of commission this week. But it is a preliminary matter. I noticed when I was looking at the public comment this evening that a letter that we had actually forwarded on to the planning department several weeks ago didn't actually make it into the record. So I just wanted to pass out that letter if I could.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think all of you should be familiar with this property from the August meeting. There was an application before you.
I barely remember it.
I assume there was probably 40 applications in between, but you probably remember this particular property. So there was an application that was before you in August. I did sort of outline that and how this application differs from that application in my narrative. But that application was denied. It was for a 2-vehicle garage with a living space above. It would have been situated, we were seeking a rear yard setback variance like we are in this case, but in that case, we would have had a rear yard setback of 1.7 feet at the closest point to the proposed structure, whereas in this instance, we're proposing a very scaled back garage addition with living space above that would be situated 12.5 feet to almost 15 feet. I think it's 14.8 feet off of that rear boundary. So it is a significant difference. And obviously, I discussed that in the narrative to overcome the Fisher v. Dover in case that came up as part of the discussion tonight. As I pointed out, the property is a corner lot situated at the corner or intersection of Richards Avenue and Lincoln Avenue. The Creeley's residence is a pretty small, narrow, 2-story single-family home. It's accessed from Lincoln Avenue, where the existing driveway is and where the primary access to the home is actually located. There is a non-conforming garage, as you'll see on the plan that's up on the screen, at the end of the driveway. Behind that, there's also a chicken coop that both run parallel to the rear, or I think it's the easterly boundary. In this instance, the existing garage and the chicken coop are approximately 1.4 feet off of that rear boundary in their existing condition. The garage is in relatively poor condition. It is too small and functionally obsolete to fit a modern vehicle. The Creeleys would like to demolish that garage as well as the chicken coop behind it, construct a attached one-car garage with bedroom space above that would still technically be situated within the rear setback, but as I pointed out, 12.5 to 14.8 feet off of the rear boundary. The only other thing I would point out is that there is as you'll see on the plans, it's approximately 17-foot wide driveway of the abutters that does sort of like encroach over our property line, but I did just kind of want to point that out in case you were wondering about some of the notations in the plan. So turning to the variance criteria, granting the variance will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance or the public interest. To some degree, I think all setback provisions are intended to preserve the light, air, and space between structures on abutting properties. However, when it comes to residential zones, more often than not, and particularly in Portsmouth, there's a more stringent rear yard setback, in this case double what's required for a side yard setback. The primary purpose is really to create usable backyard areas that interconnect with one another. That's, I think, a good part of urban planning. With respect to the Creeley property, though, and this is one of the unique characteristics about it, the right side yard is actually their backyard or their rear yard, while the area that is considered to be their rear yard is actually their left side yard, based on the orientation of the driveway and the access to their existing home. The area that is their rear yard is also immediately adjacent to the right side yard of 192 Lincoln Avenue. Therefore, there's not really any connection with any other backyard in the neighborhood. In the present case, as I pointed out, the proposed garage will be set back a significant distance from the rear property boundary. It would be compliant if that rear boundary were considered to be a side boundary. The proposed garage has been designed to the minimum width necessary to support the proposed use. We believe that approving the variance will actually increase the light, air, and space of the abutting property at 192 Lincoln Avenue, really improve the conditions of that property. As I pointed out, there is a 17-foot wide driveway on that property, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed garage. That already acts as an open space buffer between the properties. The nearest structure, I scaled it off, it's just over 30 feet away from where this proposed garage's closest point would be. We're also proposing a landscape buffer along the boundary line as well, adjacent to the garage. So for these reasons, we believe that granting the variance will not be detrimental to the public interest in any way, will also not negatively alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Substantial justice will be done in granting the relief. There really wouldn't be any gain to the general public I can think of by denying the variance request. The approval would result in a more functional garage for the Creelys with living space above, which would actually serve as a bedroom space for them in this instance, without having any negative impact on the abutting property. And there is only really one potentially impacted abutter. That individual wrote the letter of support that I passed out to the board. They're very supportive of this application. They were the last as well. So therefore, I believe in this instance, the loss to the applicant outweighs any potential benefit to the general public in denying the relief that's before you. Surrounding property values will not be diminished by granting the variance. I think the abutter's support of the proposed garage is evidence that surrounding property values will not be diminished. In fact, all the abutters, immediate abutters, did write letters of support as far as I could see in the public comment. I was unaware of several of them before I read through the public comment tonight. So I'm not going to point to each of them because I can't remember all their last names, but you should have those in your packets. As I pointed out, the existing garage is obsolete. It does sit right on the common boundary of 192 Lincoln Avenue. Demolishing that and the chicken coop, which is also non-conforming, constructing a new code-compliant, more conforming garage in the property, buffered by landscaping, can only lead to an increase in the most directly impacted abutting property. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The property does have several distinct characteristics that distinguish it from surrounding properties. It is a corner lot. It contains a single-family home that's accessed off of Lincoln Avenue where the driveway is. That does make it particularly unique. I mean, but for it having a Richards Avenue address, it could have a Lincoln Avenue address and probably should in this instance. As I've already pointed out, the area of the property defined as the rear yard is really their side yard, doesn't have any connection with anyone else's backyard. It would be a compliant proposed building if it were considered a side yard, more than compliant. So when you consider this and the primary purpose behind the more restrictive rear yard setback requirement, we believe that there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provision and its application to the property. So I hope you'll support the request before you. I would be remiss not to point out that I've been involved with applications before. Won't identify any of them. I've also seen applications before that have come before the city, and I'm speaking of the city generally, not just this board, that have determined that there's 2 side yards, no rear yard, and 2 front yards. So there has been differing interpretations of the ordinance. I can think of one actually that was heard by this board within the past couple months. It wasn't a rear yard setback variance being sought, but the plans themselves, as I saw online, showed 2 side yards, 2 front yards. Ultimately, whether or not relief needed to be sought, I think, it was, again, I think the ordinance has just been interpreted differently by different people. What's before you tonight is the way I interpret it. I believe that the diagrams in the ordinance show that there is always a rear yard, 2 front yards, and a side yard. But I do think there has been a difference of interpretation, I think. But on the merits of this application, I believe it meets the 5 criteria regardless. So For those reasons, I hope you'll support, and happy to answer any questions you have before I lose my voice completely again today. Thank you.
Mr. Rossi.
Just to be clear, if the address was a Lincoln Avenue address rather than Richards Avenue, this would be conforming to all setbacks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this proposal?
Good evening, John Stebbins, 390 Richards Avenue. I live 5 houses away from Sean and Andy, and I just wanted to say that every house in between my house, which has non-conforming conditions, and Andy and Sean's house has non-conforming conditions. So I think this is a pretty straightforward proposal. The entire neighborhood, I hate to speak for everybody, but I'm the only one here tonight, is in support of this proposal. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to speak in favor? Anyone to speak in opposition? 2, 4, or against? The public hearing is closed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance request as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Okay.
Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. This is one of those odd cases that Mr. Mantle is always talking about, where we have a corner lot and there's some confusion about side, not confusion, I mean, it's clear, but there's ambiguity, if you will, about what should be a side yard and what should be a backyard, even though the ordinance is clearly written. However, the spirit of the ordinance is really not to be, hung up on the technicality of whether or not this is a Lincoln Avenue or Richards Avenue address. I feel that the driveway is coming off of Lincoln, the entrance is off of Lincoln, and in all practical measures, the spirit of the ordinance is observed because of the orientation of the building and the entrance being coming off of Lincoln. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. There is really no loss to the public to allowing this, which would, under other circumstances with a different address, be a conforming building to proceed. And then, since there's no loss to the public by having this proceed, any loss to the applicant would be an injustice. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. We have abutters in support of this. They would be in the best position to judge whether or not this change would affect their properties in a negative way, and no one is viewing it that way. So I believe that criterion is satisfied as well. And literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship due to special conditions. I think the special condition of this property is the oddity that it has a Richards Avenue address when it's really oriented in such a manner as it should have a Lincoln Avenue address. And because of that, there is no fair relationship between the requirements of the ordinance for setback, for the rear yard setback, and this property and this proposal. So on that basis, I propose that this variance request be approved.
Thank you. Mr. Mattson?
Yep, I'll just add that this proposal will make the property much closer to conforming, and light, air, and privacy will be preserved.
Any comments? Ms. Murchison?
I will not be supporting the motion. I recognize that they're pulling in off of the rear yard line, but what constituted the 1.2 or whatever it was beforehand was, structures that are not nearly as significant, substantial, have the massing of this structure. This structure is larger than the house itself by a couple, I don't know, maybe just 67 square feet, but it is a very substantial addition to the house. It's kind of odd looking, to be honest. I know that architecture is not our purview, but it's a significant and substantial structure that is not quite meeting the right rear yard setbacks. I recognize that it's better than the existing one. I I also remain concerned when we receive these successive applications from applicants, whereby I recognize I do not think Fisher v. Dover actually applies in here, but that, the application looks less, I guess, violative of the zoning ordinance or less concerning the second time we see it. And this concerns me. We're getting a few of these lately, but I will not be supporting this motion.
If I could make a comment about the successive applications, I agree with you that that is an issue that we're facing. And perhaps partially we might want to be careful in speculating about when an application comes before us, and they're not talking directly to anything that you've said, but we often on this board speculate, well, if it was this, then it would be a different story, or if it was that, and it gives the misleading impression that we have an idea of what could be approved, and when each application must be considered on its own. So I think, so on that basis, I share your concern.
I think the burden is on us.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I'm going to vote in favor of this because I think although the addition is very large, the ask is not very large. The variance is not very large. And it is more conforming, and so it will get my vote. Are there further comments? Okay. Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
No.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so. Thank you. Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, we have the request of, and thank you for your patience, we have the request of Bobby and Angela.
They're asleep.
Oh, they are. Braswell, for a property located at 82 Wybird Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing accessory structure and construct a new detached garage, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow A 0-foot rear yard where 20 is required, and B, a 6-foot right yard where 10 is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 148, Lot 59, and lies within General Residence A. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Good evening.
Hi.
Madam Chair, board members, and staff, thank you all for staying late to review our application. My name is Anthony or Tucker Richards. I'm with Southern Maine Designs, and I'm here on behalf of Bobby and Angela Braswell, who have an existing 3-car garage that is built directly on top of the property line at their existing single-story or single-family residence, and they would like to tear that garage down and replace it with a new garage on a monolithic slab, one that can hopefully withstand the winters. As it is right now, the building is fairly dilapidated and unsafe. The homeowners don't really want to go in there to store anything right now, much less park a vehicle or operate the garage doors. So we would like to address this safety issue is our first and foremost concern. Our second concern is to get to bed at a reasonable hour, so I will abbreviate the approach here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to dive in further, but as has been said many times tonight, both points A and B for the variances will not be contrary to the public interest. I apologize. Let me back up just a minute. The relief that we need is from zoning ordinance 10.521 to permit 217 square feet of new structure 4 inches or 0.33 feet from the rear property line, and to permit the side of that same structure to be 6 feet from the right side property line. To give a little bit of context, the existing building, as I said, is built directly on the property line, and the overhang of the roof protrudes past the property line, let alone the setback, and drains stormwater from their shed onto their neighbor's property. Our solution to this is to scoot the whole garage forward 4 inches and apply a gutter system to collect that stormwater runoff, and instead of dumping it on our neighbor's property, bring it back to our own. If you look at the supplementary information that I provided, looking at the GIS map, which is just for reference, you'll notice that the driveway to this property is about 14 feet wide and about 100 feet long. It is very difficult to access, and you have one path of entry and exit with your vehicle. We would love to be able to bring the garage more into conformance with the property, but moving it any more than 4 inches will create very tight turning radius in that driveway in the corner, and they won't be able to safely exit much, and it wouldn't be safe to expect somebody to S-turn in reverse all the way out of that property. So we'd like to keep the shed as close to the original location as property while still providing a safe turning radius for the vehicles of this property. The with those reliefs required, as been stated a couple of times tonight, the variances will not be contrary to public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance observed can be kind of combined. The use of land, building, and structures for business, industrial, residential, or other purposes. The encroaching and dilapidated garage will be replaced by a tasteful single-story garage that is roughly the same size. The land use does not change. It's still remaining a single-family home. It will be replaced in kind. It will have the same footprint, and it will still be a single story. There will not be any crazy roof pitches or cupolas. The impacts on property, outdoor lighting, noise, vibration, stormwater, flood, all of this are positive impacts for our plan. The preservation and enhancement of the visual environment is a little bit difficult in this particular lot, as it is kind of funneled into the middle of a whole bunch of properties, and there the shed is. So the preservation of the visual environment, this will definitely be a better looking garage than the one that they have now. It will not be falling over. This is not in a historic district, so that does not really apply. And the protection of natural resources, including groundwater, surface area, and wetlands, wildlife and habitat, and air quality. The new home will the new garage will not adversely affect natural resources. Granting the variance will not diminish the surrounding property values. Removing the significant structures very close to the common lot line and the construction of a new garage requiring only minor rear variances will improve the value of the property. Denial of the variance is unsafe, and moving the existing garage will reduce the setback. So that is one proponent. The purpose of the setback requirement is to maintain between neighbors. We are increasing the space between neighbors. The proposed use is reasonable. Again, single-family residence, that does not change. And substantial justice will be done by granting the variance because the encroachment on the rear setback will be decreased. The improvements on the existing condition may remove hazardous materials. We don't know. They may not, but we will be removing the hazardous structures from the property and replacing it with a structure that will be able to weather the winters, provide safe storage, and a safe place to dock their vehicles. So for all of those reasons, we request that the Portsmouth Zoning Board of Adjustment grant the requested variances.
Okay. Are there any questions? Thank you. Got to do it. Is there anyone here to, I think I got to do it. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition? 2, 4, or against? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Anybody?
I'm not doing the work this time.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
I knew we could.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Ross. Go ahead, Mr. Mattson.
So taking the first two together, the variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. The proposed use doesn't conflict with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance, and it won't alter the essential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or otherwise injure public rights. Substantial justice is done. The benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the general public or to other individuals. And the next one is the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. In this case, there's no evidence of that. And the last one is literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Because of the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. We'll start with that. This proposed use is reasonable. They're replacing a garage with a very similar new structure that is safer, more sound, and slightly improving on the nonconformity. This is a very unusual lot shape with a small right-of-way entrance and a tough turning radius for vehicle parking. Given the location of this property compared to the surrounding properties, light, air, and privacy will be preserved.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add?
I would just say that this, reiterate that this property really does have special conditions. It's not, there is no property around this that is configured this way. So it has hardship.
Okay, so, comments, ready to vote? Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Margerson?
Yes.
Mr. Manno?
Yes.
Ms. Record?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, you are approved. But, do you know how you ended up on this weird place? Was this house built at the same time as all the others? 2-minute answer. You know what? I'm going to save you the trouble. Hold on. I'm going to move to adjourn, and then I'm going to ask this question, okay?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.